Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast.
This is brought to you by, well, you.
If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. This is Sacred Symbols Cross-Defining Duke. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined by the whole family today. Except for, I always say that, but then Dagan's not here, Gene's not here. I have to make all these caveats. I should just stop saying it. Cog, it's good to see you in your Sega Dreamcast shirt. Were you like me there on 9/9/99?
Yes, I was 9/9. One of the greatest launches for a console as far as software launch. Yeah, absolutely. Good to be here. Crossover, having fun with the boys. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. Dreamcast was the one Sega console I really loved. Yes. And was so disappointed. I was in there. Actually, he comes up on Knockback a lot, but my brother's best friend PJ imported a Dreamcast, and we were playing it a bunch that summer, and we went to like some fighting competition like at Stony Brook University, and they had a Dreamcast there, and then I was like, I gotta get this thing, and I loved it. And then by April 2001 they cancel it,
and your PlayStation came and ruined things.
Yeah, it definitely did. Although part of the thing that ruined the Dreamcast 2 is that you can literally just put any CD in it and it would somehow play. So that was interesting.
That too.
Mr. Matty Plays in a new venue. Is this the first time you've recorded video from this venue for any reason, or?
No, I recorded a video yesterday on Xbox with Game Pass Core and everything, but this is my first podcast in the new venue.
Oh, okay, we'll take that.
Yeah, so there is an accolade there, but happy to be here. I'm sure everyone's relieved I have some proper lighting to some degree. I know the right side of my face is still a little dark. We're working on that, but you can see me now. The comment boys can calm down.
It's about goddamn time, Matty.
I know.
It was a little, I mean, I don't care about aesthetic really. I really don't. So it's not something that would really bother me, but I did think it was funny that it went so long.
I know. You know? I probably should have done something about it, but in my head, I was like, I'm moving soon. I know my lighting setup's going to be different. And the way my desk was cornered in, there was no space to put a light. And I didn't want like a bright ring light in my eyes for we go for 2-3 hours. So I was a little concerned about that. But now I got this nice open office, lots of lights in here. And it's good. It's good. I like it.
Cool, man. Well, congratulations on the new house. It's a big deal.
Thank you. It's overwhelming.
I know. We got to figure out some sort of housewarming gift to get you. It's funny, man, because it is overwhelming. Like I've said on other shows, we're getting like all the shelving put in the garage for our merch so we can organize it better. And so I had to I've been here for 3 years and 2 months now, I guess. I had to finally like organize things in the garage and get things into the attic. And I was like, why didn't I just do this?
Finish.
Yeah, like why didn't I just do this like years ago? The fuck
For me,
am I doing?
I am obsessed with cleaning this place out right now. So like, we got boxes all in the fucking hallway and everything. And I'm just like, look, I said, I don't care. This is not my home until I get this shit out of here. So
definitely.
I'm a little more gung-ho. My back is killing me. So I bet. I'm happy to be sitting for once.
I bet the beauty of moving I just sold or got rid of or threw out everything or gave away almost everything I owned in California, except I sent 4 boxes of things, like big boxes, and then I just gave away everything else. Mm-hmm. So I just had to buy new things, which was no moving. But now I can never leave. Which is good. Chris Raygun, good to see you, my friend, all the way out there in California.
Mm-hmm.
What a mystical place it is. How are you today, my friend?
Doing well. You know, nothing. I'm not. Don't got a new house or nothing. Yeah. I have comparatively little to say, but I mean, it's a good day. I got up at 4 a.m. today naturally, which is like a weird. I just woke up and I was like, I can't go back to sleep. I guess I'll just be alive for a while.
That's no good.
And that's like, it's really weird. I just played a ton of Metal Gear Solid 5, basically, is what I did.
Nice.
Hell yeah. And so we're here.
Well, at least you didn't feel any feelings.
Yeah, no. That's long
good.
gone.
Yeah, good. I was hardcore pressing Chris when he was living in New York to buy a house. It's entirely Chris's option that he hasn't yet bought a house, but I'm going to continue to push him. Not now, though, necessarily, because now you're in California. We want you to live closer out to us before you buy anything. Don't settle out there.
No, I'm not going to buy a house out here. That's insane.
Okay, good. Dustin Furman, how are you today, my friend? Good to see you.
I also, like Chris, woke up unreasonably early. It was 6 a.m. and I wake up almost like I suddenly awoke and I was just completely covered in sweat. I'm like, what is going on? It's 1,000,000 degrees in here. No power this morning. So the fans
Oh.
were off. The AC, I don't know how long the AC wasn't running. And I was like, well, this sucks. So I just promptly just decided to try to just go back to bed and just ignore it, which was a little difficult. But then when I woke up, the AC was back on. I woke up in comfort once again. So maybe it was all a fever dream, but I'm back. I found my PlayStation E3 Experience 2016 cup that I'm using. The fun of the movies, the excitement of E3 is what it says on it. So
Cool.
Wow.
Nice little memorabilia I got from
era,
that.
man. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
man.
That's a great piece of memorabilia.
That's
Was
right.
that the theater dusted? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, that was the in-theater.
Bro,
they did that a few years.
I was there. I think we might have been in the same place. I was there that year because that was my second. Yeah, I'm sorry, continue.
They did these all over the country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not the ones that.
Oh, yeah,
okay,
those are the remote ones. I got you.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
I was there, Cog. I was there. So
we were in the same spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was a theater in downtown LA, and I remember it for the expo. I went to it. It was really cool.
that was one of my very last events ever, actually. All right, good. It's good to have everyone here today. Gather everyone. I've been looking forward to this for some time. I actually went on a podcast, an Xbox podcast last week to practice for this podcast.
Planet
I didn't watch it.
Addict.
So-
Taking
It
warm-up
was-
shots.
I forget what the podcast is called. Hold on a second. I'm going to pull it up and promote it.
Planet Xbox, right?
Yeah, Planet Xbox. That's what it is. I just didn't want to say the
I
wrong
saw
one.
in the
Planet Xbox.
Defining Duke Discord. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was on that, and it was fun. And so I told them on there, they were like, we were surprised we got access to you so quickly, because usually I like give it a little time. I'm like, well, this is a fun time to talk about this stuff now, so that's number one. But I got to practice, because we've been in PlayStation Land and Sacred Symbols for so long that I'm finally getting to talk to people that are going to have, I think, well, Dustin and Chris don't necessarily agree with me on everything or most things, but it'll have an interesting, different take on this podcast. I've really been looking forward to recording this. For everyone that's curious, we've tried to cover this from as many angles as possible. So on Duke last week, on the regular episode, you had Hogue, right, on for a little while, which was cool, or a bit. I mean, you had him on for quite a while. So that we got him in there. I did the Matt Stoller interview, much to many people's consternation, which I thought was really fascinating. Get the anti-monopolist, frankly, liberal or progressive side of the argument. And that's actually been one of the most continuously interesting things about this whole situation, is just how deeply conservative and Republican this move is, and like how Republicans and conservatives support this view, and how that has to kind of shape up with the progressivism of the video games industry. So I think it was actually quite important to get someone like Matt Stoller on, who would traditionally be in line with the feelings politically of the industry. So there's some consistency there, and I appreciate that. So now we get to talk amongst ourselves. I sent everyone 8 like ad lib questions. We're going to get into those. All right. We had technical problems. We're back. Let's go around the horn and see how everyone's feeling now. So as of the time we're recording this, and by the way, I want this to be like, and I think I'm going to call it like the great ABK blowout or something. On Sacred Symbols, we're going to talk about the deal that was signed and kind of the ramifications, and then finally move on with our lives. So consider this the be all end all podcast, where we'll get everything out if we have the time to do so. And it'll come up obviously in passing later on. I just wanted to let everyone know that, because some people are wondering why we didn't talk about it after a nearly 5-hour episode last week. And that's because I was too busy complaining about Horizon. Okay. So I want to go around the horn and see how everyone's feeling now. As we're finding this, and I was reading this just before, here it is on Reuters. Jesus Christ, what the fuck's going on here? There we go. The article is called Microsoft in Talks to Extend Deal Contract with Activision. So as we know, there is actually a time limit on this deal, and there is some conversation going on that, first of all, Activision could just be like, we're out. Take the $3 billion and they could also renegotiate a price, or someone else can come in and offer more. So all these things can happen, but I think it seems like they both want to mutually get the deal done. And so I think we should proceed. At least I'm going to proceed assuming that this is eventually going to happen, even though there's stuff with UK and all of that with the spinoff with cloud gaming. So there's stuff still in flux, but let's consider this with finality that this is happening. Maddie, I'm curious, what are your feelings now that this seems to have come to pass?
As a host, relief, just to know that we might be able to talk about something else. When it comes to Xbox, I can't help but feel, at least in the initial point, a little excitement, because what can come to Game Pass. Like, we're already seeing Call of Duty, Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 3, like the backwards. They did something with the servers over at Activision, and so the numbers are really skyrocketing. And with that, I think about, you dump those games into Game Pass, and you might see, like, I think it was like 10,000 plus people on Black Ops 2. You might see double, triple that now, which is exciting. So that was like a really good era of Call of Duty. And I think of that immediate value, that immediate impact. And I think of some of the more, I pay closer attention to Bethesda, so I was aware of certain things that were like trademark and whatnot, like Redfall, but some of the more surprises, like, oh, what is Odyssey? Will that be exclusive or not? And kind of learning more about how Activision will operate. I think, as foolishly, if I were to be excited about something, it's the idea that maybe we might get some older IP back, maybe Back and Pack goes live again. For me, though, the realist says that this is a mobile and Call of Duty move, and I don't think much is going to change. So I think for an Xbox host, overall, I think my commentary has been pretty neutral on it, because I've always gone on record as saying, like, I don't care if it really goes through or not. I'm not particularly in love with Activision. I'm not going to pretend to be, because I cover Xbox a lot. But, I feel like a lot of people are fooling themselves thinking, what's going to happen with Microsoft's going to come in, they're going to clean house, take these companies off of the Call of Duty sweatshop and make them go make Singularity 2, go make a new Spyro, go make a new Crash, like go bring back Tony Hawk again, like let's do Pro Skater 3 and 4 remake. It's stuff I really want to see, and I'm hopeful of it, but a lot of my feelings, I think I still need to watch it all shake out, but initially at least I'm excited for Game Pass, and I'm excited to see what exclusive Xbox can net, because I think it's going to bring a lot of stability to their ecosystem that they previously didn't have, because content's always been a problem, and Activision's always putting stuff out yearly. So that's something that Xbox can have an answer for, because last thought, you remove Bethesda from this year, and Xbox is only producing Forza and Minecraft, which is the same shit we've got for a while. So we saw this year, even with Redfall, it was still something new and different. It was awful, but new and different. And you see the impact they had with Hi-Fi Rush, with maybe Starfield, provided it pans out well, what that new injection of content can look like for an ecosystem. And so with Activision, I mean, they, beyond Call of Duty, they have a plethora of IP, and if Xbox uses them well, we're looking at a whole different ball game now. So, I'm a little cautious, but there's some excitement for sure.
Cog, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, now is this the first question?
No. This is. We're going to get into all of the numbers. I just want
number one.
I just want high-ranking thoughts right now, and then we're going to go through those. Yeah,
kind of similar to Maddie. It's just like excitement that it's finally coming to a close. Whatever way the pendulum was going to swing, it was looking spooky for the acquisition for some time, especially with the CMA block, initially. But I just think at the end of the day, this is one of those inflection points in gaming, and we have to see what happens from this point on, right? And from for the Xbox brand, there's excitement. It's just there's a little bit of the unknown as far as what's going to happen, as far as like Maddie alluded to, as far as management and things of that nature and stuff like that. But in the short term, there's definitely excitement as far as just the pure influx of what is coming in. Obviously, the beast that is Call of Duty, and I'll get into more specific thoughts. But my initial thoughts are relief. It's finally coming to an end. We can start to move it forward and process, kind of a deal. And just got to see how these things shake out. But I have more in-depth thoughts when we get into the nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Chris, how are you feeling now that it seems like maybe this is over?
Oh, the word of the day is relieve, right? Jesus Christ. Like I think the person who was quickest sick of this. Like I think like it took me like maybe like a month before I was like, are we still talking about this? It's been like how many? It feels like it's been a century since we started talking about this. So the fact that we're in like this home stretch is really, really relieving. I have always kind of said on the show that like I'm glad that this is what's happening, and not like, Tencent coming in and swooping this out from under them. And then we have like a really weird situation on our hands where a lot of really, really big unignorable IP come out of Tencent. It's convenient now when it's like these weird kind of like these weird offshoot games that we don't really pay attention to. But like if it's Call of Duty and, even anything remotely associated with Activision, Diablo, like, geez, I can't, that's too much of a wrench. So I feel somewhat relieved, somewhat glad that it went through this way. Obviously my hope as far as like how well this is going to shake up for Xbox isn't necessarily all that high, because I think Maddie touched on the fact that I do think this is like a mobile first kind of thing to kind of get them in the door in that environment where they really don't have a foothold at all. But there is part of me that says like, man, they need content for Game Pass. That's like the Game Pass is a content machine.
Yeah.
So like maybe they, there is a part of me that's like foolishly kind of hoping for it's like, yeah, let's get another Crash in there. Come on, because there's some teams that could stay on Call of Duty support because like they've been doing that for a while. But like Toys for Bob is not one of them, and like those studios deserve a bit more of a shake. Whether or not that happens is that's pie in the sky for me. But ultimately, I'm just glad that it's over. I can see clearly now the rain is gone.
Unless Microsoft or unless Activision says we don't want to do this anymore, or I'm really curious about that. Just because they could get away with it now, that would be a really powerful message to send to Microsoft. Not a good one. That would really hurt what was probably a budding friendship on the back end, but we'll see. Dustin, high level thoughts.
Yeah. So I feel like I want to put like extremely mild disappointment, just in that through and through, I think I'm a lot like you, Colin, where ultimately this will not affect me in my personal gaming habits, in that I play Call of Duty on PC, and pretty much all Blizzard games I play on PC as well. So when it comes to my gaming habits, my preference on PlayStation, for the most part, I wasn't getting those games there anyway. But I think that the thing that concerns me, and I'll try to put this briefly because I know this is a lot of what we're going to get into, is just that I was pretty hot, or how about this, a lot more positive on Xbox at the beginning of this generation than I am now. And a lot of this comes down to my personal feelings about being so fucking disappointed in Halo Infinite. And seeing other things too happen to IPs that weren't necessarily as close to me. It's just that I have repeatedly been frustrated with how Microsoft has been stewards of the IPs that they have. We talk about whether the reason why Microsoft is buying stuff is because they haven't been as successful in creating their own IP, which I think is partially true in that they have done a good job. Think of Gears, you think of Forza, you think of Halo. And some of those, Forza is still doing awesome, right? So it's not that they've completely screwed up in any way, but I just think it's such a personal thing for me with Halo. And in particular, thinking about Bethesda, and we had that that podcast that Phil was on with when he was talking with Kind of Funny about how they should have been more hands-on. I'm like, yeah, you fucking should have. And so hopefully there's some lessons learned, but now the pool is getting so much bigger, right? And so I do feel some concern for these IPs in just that they weren't very hands-on before with some things when they should have been. And like I said, the pool's getting so much bigger now. But again, hopefully this is lessons learned from this past year. That's a huge possibility, and I'm open to that as well. But I think Maddie, I really like your point about and I don't want to say this as like a super negative, but I think there is some wishful thinking about old IP right now, just because I think of also as a Banjo-Kazooie fan, like thinking about that and some other things too, where it's like they've been sitting on a lot of stuff for a long time. And honestly, that might be the right financial business decision, is that some of these are like bubble games, right? For us hardcore, and they're not really the good market games. So I get that. But I'm not planning on Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 or 4, even though that would be fucking awesome.
I've loved the to that point, I've loved the discourse, because I'm sure people that weren't around or weren't playing games then, or just don't know who owns what or whatever, have been looking like, what does Activision own? Like, what is this going to mean? And somehow there's been some sort of line in the conversation about bringing Prototype back. And I'm like, Prototype?
I would love that. I love Prototype.
Prototype. Listen. No.
Prototype
I will push back. Prototype's a perfect Game Pass game, dude. Like, it's just like you turn on, you like surf on people's bodies across the dude. That game was so violent. It's insane.
That game was the poorest man's infamous. It came out
see,
around
that's the thing. I
disagree.
I remember being in middle school, and it was literally Prototype versus Infamous, and I was the Prototype guy. Like, everyone's Infamous gang. Nah, bro, I love Infamous 2 way more than any Prototype or Infamous game, but I'll just say that Prototype 1 versus Infamous 1, I'm taking Prototype 1 all day, which I know is a build.
God, I'm just so surprised by that.
Prototype.
I wrote the the strategy guide at IGN for the first prototype, so I knew that game very intimately. But then I wouldn't call it a spite platinum, but I did just out of curiosity, and so I would shut people up. I platinumed prototype 2 when it came out, just so I could have complete dominance over the conversation without people trying to.
I never played the second one, but
the second one was when they would make games in 2.5 years. I mean, it wasn't offensive. It was just I am making fun of prototype, but it's just funny to me that people are like Call of Duty, Diablo, like all the big ones, and then there's like prototype. I'm like, I don't know, guys. You might want to keep digging down that IP list a little bit more, but to each their own. All right, so my feeling on this is one of relief as well. I'm not super sure at the time we're recording this that this is going to happen without, like, the more I'm looking at this Reuters piece or whatever, like, we'll see what happens, I guess. I think it's going to happen. What I should say is that it's not going to happen without some sort of problem with the CMA or like an extension of the date or whatever. So maybe we're being a little hopeful in that sense, but I'm generally happy to leave this behind because it really has been going on. This saga has been going on for more than a year. And I appreciate first of all, I think that, and this is what I was saying with the Matt Stoller conversation, is I personally think it's very important when a deal like this happens, that it earns exceptional amounts of scrutiny, and that people don't think it deserves scrutiny really scares me. Not as a gamer or in the games industry, but just generally speaking. You think that $70 billion merger should just happen with just a shrug of the shoulder? I think that that's a horrible idea. And that was actually something that Stoller was saying. I have the notes here from our conversation because we were talking about, and you guys might remember, like AOL and Time Warner, when they got together in 2000, that was a $182 billion deal. And obviously it got a lot of scrutiny. And I was actually asking him, why is my whole argument against the FTC kind of going after Microsoft, because I'd never really made a legal argument for it, was think of all the things that they let happen. Why would they go after this? Right. And I named some of them off, like Kraft and Heinz. They merged, right? SmithKline and Glaxo merged. AT&T and Time Warner merged. These deals were all way bigger. And I was like, well, what? And his argument was basically like, well, you have to start somewhere if you want to kind of turn towards an anti-monopoly or an anti-vertical monopoly stance. So I think that it's good that it earns scrutiny, and I am a little concerned and confused. See, like, I hate the federal government, but I actually hate businesses more than the federal government, because at least there's an argument that the federal government is in some way accountable to you through your elected representatives that then install these people at places like the FTC. So I like having that adversarial relationship between the government and businesses. I think we should have a lot more of it. And I think that the government should be going after a lot more big business. But I do understand the argument that they let all these other things by the goalie. And so it seems very conspicuous that you would go after this now. And I do think that is a powerful argument. And unfortunately, I don't think that video games rank high enough to grab people's attention. Like, say, if there was the SmithKline and Glaxo merger was in 2000. If that happened today, I think that would be a big problem. The one thing that I will say that I've come around on, though, and I've really thought deeply about this, and it's something that Chris often says about Tencent and others, and other people say this too, is that I don't think that Tencent would have been able to buy Activision. Like, I think that the government would have stepped in. The reason that I think that that's true is because with PGA and Live Golf, which is a much smaller deal, the government's freaking out. Yeah. Like, there's like congressional hearings about it. There's people saying, including Stoller, who knows if he's right or not, saying like, this will not happen because, or at least the way it is, because it's just the government. So a Chinese, remember Huawei, Huawei, for people that want to go read about it, tried, which is a huge Chinese telecom, tried to come to the United States several years ago. And the government was like, nope, you're not allowed to do business here. So that to me seemed like more of a pressing issue, but that now that I see the Live Golf situation, I'm like, I don't know if that would actually be allowed to happen. I think the government would just be like, you can't do it. But we would see what happens anyway. But let's get into the ad libs. Maddie, I'm going to go to you last to give you time to get your answer.
I already wrote my answers down.
Okay,
I apologize
right.
if I didn't want to come across disrespectful. I was just jotting down little notes and stuff. So I'm good to go whenever, but I can still go last.
Too late.
That's
You
fine.
have come across as disrespectful. I'll go to you first.
Oh,
then.
no.
No, so okay. Number one, the question. So I wrote these just very simple ad libs that I wanted people to do. I just thought it would be a good way to organize our conversation so we can make sure to hit things and not be too much. So we'll just go around the horn over and over again. Okay. And we'll talk about whatever. We can take our time. Number one is Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means blank for the Xbox brand. So what do you say there, Maddie?
I say stability. That would be my pick personally. I think the biggest problem Xbox has had, as I alluded to earlier, so my answer will be short, is output of content. That has been the thing that I think they've missed a lot on. GameStop or Game Pass, not Stop, has served sort of as this really good stopgap where I've mentioned on the show before that you kind of get these games, like we'll take Outriders as just the first example that comes to mind, or Wolong, that feels like an Xbox game. Like it has that Xbox exclusive hype. There's added interest from the community because it's a day one Game Pass game. But a lot of that content's never really been their own. Again, this is like the first year we're really seeing a steady output of a lot of that stuff being mostly their own. And so to me, when you get a company as big as Activision, if they plan to not make use of the entire IP library, like many of us love to dream of, but even some of it, whatever's cooking, we know about, of course, Call of Duty. We know about things like Odyssey. We heard there was a rumor about a new Spyro game, maybe. That was from Gaming Bible, though, so I don't know how legitimate that report is. But I think when you add those into naturally what Bethesda's working on, we still don't know what it is working on at this point in time of recording. Machine Games, we're wondering if there's still Wolfenstein 3 on the table, but it looks like they're all in on Indiana Jones. So
that's a bummer.
There's surprises all throughout, right? And I think when you combine that, what we know about Xbox's first party studios, and now you throw Activision in the mix, there's no longer any excuses. Like this is kind of marking a big change for Xbox, and the tune has to change from the fans as well. Like I don't think can be any more of this rah fight back energy, because it's like, okay, they're going to have all the weapons at their disposal now. They got to learn how to fire them off. And I don't think people have to be patient anymore. I don't think they have to be understanding anymore like they have been for the last number of years. This should mean stability. This should mean that you get games on Xbox every year. Multiple first party, if you will, exclusives every year. There should be no longer any excuses. So to me, that'd be my answer. It should mean stability for Xbox moving forward.
Yeah, I like that answer. Cog, what does this mean for you? Let's read it again. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means blank for the Xbox brand.
Continued commitment. I think they need to properly support the vision of Game Pass, which is them reinventing the wheel, changing the rules, so to speak. And in order to do that, you need ownership. You need to own IP. You need to have consistent cadence, from a quarterly standpoint. And I think where they truly have reinvented themselves, again, with services, cloud, PC, and now mobile, right? This is a big part of this. Mobile is a huge part. And I think also the Blizzard part with PC Game Pass, that's a huge part, right? So basically, it's these multiple entry points of them trying to get into the space, and then with an Azure backbone. For me, it's commitment, because I've been with this brand from the beginning. And one of the reasons why Xbox for me is because I remember, seeing the OG Xbox, and at first saying, hey, they're a services company. What are they doing? You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know why they're here. Like and I remember seeing like Halo and things of that nature that introduced me to LAN party, local LAN. Okay, I became a network engineer in IT just to learn how to put Ethernet cable because of Halo, because of a LAN party. I was actually one of the first Xbox alpha testers for Xbox Live.
Oh, wow.
To me, that represented the future. I came from an era where we came to each other's house, but this is like, hey, you're at your house, I'm at my house. The other thing is innovation in the space. Ethernet cable as far as in the back of the box, hard drive in the system, custom soundtracks. These were things that I think Xbox doesn't get enough credit for pushing things forward. So to me, Game Pass is another step to this, the digital revolution, whether some may not like it or not. This is where we're going. So you have to support this vision with a system like Game Pass, and you have to feed that. So the last thing I'll say is, through the 360 era, obviously the achievement system, party chats, all of this is part of the ecosystem that is Xbox and why it is beloved. So Game Pass, again, I'm a consumer first. So I want to do what's best for me. And at the end of the day, this is big for the brand. Now, we'll talk about the other, things that they got to concern themselves with. But I think for me, I'm always going to be a techie, and that part really excites me. Now you just have to execute. But to me, this reinforces commitment, because last point I'll say, the Xbox One era proved to me how bad things and how horrible it was for them. Not only did they get their clock cleaned by PlayStation, during that generation, is we trade games and the whole stuff, and their messaging with digital was all over the place. But we look at the hashtag just ones. They actually had them. They had a Quantum Break. They had a Rise of the Roam. They had a Sunset Overdrive. Problem is they didn't own it. So that to me is the difference. It's ownership. You have to have IP to feed the beast that is Game Pass. And as an Xbox fan, it's exciting. It's exciting to see that commitment.
It's funny because if you look at stories to what you're saying, old stories. So I always think of Limbo, the game Limbo. The story behind that game is that they actually pitched it to PlayStation first. And PlayStation was like, we want to own the game. And that was always their rule, right? That's why like a relationship with Pixel Junk and Q Games was so unusual, because it's very weird for them to kind of fund games that they let go. They just own all of their IP. They own a shit ton of just random things. And so Limbo went to Microsoft and they published it, and it came to PlayStation years later. But Microsoft's openness to working in a very one-off way like that was very beneficial to them back then. And now the rules have kind of changed, and the way that Sony used to play makes a lot more sense, but Sony's actually not interested in playing that way anymore. So it's very, very unusual. I always think about that with Limbo, because there are several games, big games. I don't know if they're all public, so I won't say all of them, but that I've learned about over the years, where it's like, no, like Sony would have had this on PS3 exclusively if just they wouldn't ask to own it. And so it's funny how the times change. And I do want to say, Cog, I agree with you completely about services, that Microsoft's revolutionary stances in games can't be overlooked. I just think those stances almost never have to do with the games. Now, that's one thing. That's not everything, right? But the way we play games matters. And Xbox Live, like I said, and you're wearing your Dreamcast shirt, they were involved. Microsoft was involved with the Dreamcast, as we all know.
Yeah, and LCE.
Right, exactly. And so they learned a huge lesson, which is like, we got to get rid of this phone port and get an Ethernet port. And you're old enough to remember, people were like, what the fuck are you doing? It was crazy. It was considered nuts. Yes. And they were like, no, you have to get rid of, like, it's the quality of the gameplay is more important than the access. So like, we want fewer people that can play at a higher level. And that was a big deal. And I think that actually hurt Xbox in the beginning. So and so having Xbox Live, having your console turn on and do something more than play the disc inside of it, was Xbox's revolution. And absolutely, to a degree, Dreamcast as well, because you can go online with it. But and so I agree with you there. Xbox Live, achievements, and even Game Pass, though I think it comes from a place of desperation, is a new revolutionary way to do business. Xbox is about services and access, and Microsoft is about that all over the map. So it makes no surprise to me that that's where they've been very successful. So I wanted to say that I totally agree with you there. Chris, let's go to you. The number one here. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means blank for the Xbox brand.
I'm feeling managerial chaos because from my perspective, I know we're a little bit more positive right now. I'm gonna drag everybody down a little bit, because right now I'm seeing. I mean, we talk about Embracer Group a lot, and like kind of what they kind of went through somewhat recently, and they obviously have a way bigger. A way bigger pool of developers and studios and properties to manage, with far less of an impact and general size than Microsoft does, for sure. But I look at Microsoft and how they've managed their existing studios. I think about like what's going on at the studio that they're trying to build Perfect Dark at. I think about just how they, like Dustin said, how they handled Halo, one of their original flagships. And then I see them inherit all of these new studios in a time post Redfall where they're probably thinking, we got to get more hands-on with this. We can't sit back and just be like, well, whatever happens. We have ownership of this now, and everything that they do reflects on us in a way that's way bigger than I think that we even anticipated. And so they have to now juggle, where it's like, do we overstep? Do we leave things be? How are we going to do that if we're having trouble managing all of the IP that we currently have under our own singular roof? Like that's a tricky situation to find yourself in, and it's kind of awkward timing, I guess, because of Redfall. But I mean, and I understand Microsoft's kind of consternation with this, because back in the day, that the biggest problem that people had with Microsoft was that they would overstep, was that they would be like, hey man, if we get if we get bought by Microsoft, they're going to come in and they're going to change all of our culture. They're going to, force us to do certain things that we don't want to do. And that probably hurt their reputation early on. But I mean, the results kind of speak for themselves. Like that was when they were doing pretty damn good as far as my memory serves. Like they were pumping out some really, really good shit when they were really, really on the ball and really all over like the people that they were working with. And I think that negative shade kind of cast over them led them to kind of pull in the exact opposite direction, where it's like, okay, look, we don't want to be viewed as that company that goes in and changes culture. Let's just kind of we'll buy these big companies and we'll let them manage themselves. And now that's biting them in the ass. And so it's I don't know, man. Now that you really have to plant a stake into each of these companies and actually may have a presence and actually be a guiding force for them, hopefully not in a way that oversteps in some way that they're unhappy with, but enough that keeps them on the right track. That's probably going to be hard for them if they can't already do that with the studios that they have direct ownership from. So that's my main concern, I guess, outside of all the positives that Cog and Maddie have laid out.
Completely agree, sir.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I when you're talking, I was thinking about the whole, I mean, this is a very Colin thing, but it's like, I always think about like when you're talking, the president of the United States, right, will say, there will be like an argument for the president that he creates jobs, right? And then there's this argument that like the president has nothing to do with the economy and can't control. It's like, why are you blaming him for all these kinds of things? I say this because it's like Microsoft needs to decide moving forward, are you owning these studios or aren't you? Are you going to be responsible for what comes out of them, or are you going to pretend that they have nothing to do with you? And I'm very interested, especially with the quality of Call of Duty, because if it goes up, then Microsoft will probably be given a lot of credit for that. But if the quality of Call of Duty goes down, which it probably will, just because people are going to get tired of Call of Duty, ultimately, I imagine at some point, maybe, then they're going to be blamed for that, even though if it's not necessarily their fault either. And so I think that they're like in between a rock and a hard place with that, which is interesting. But I do want to say this about Activision Studios, the IP and everything we were talking about earlier, is that I do think there's a lot of wishful thinking. I'm sure that they're going to liberate one or two IP. Like that Hexen shirt was an indication to me that maybe they want to do something. Who knows like all the different games they want to pull. But I will say that Call of Duty still needs to be made. The idea that like you're buying Raven and then it's like, okay, now Raven's going to make this. It's like, no.
We'll make Singularity too, Raven.
Raven's going to make Call of Duty. I mean, Infinity Ward's going to make Call of Duty. Treyarch's going to make Call of Duty. Sledgehammer's going to make Call of Duty. So you're buying that
Infinity
whole
Ward
pipeline.
Is making that RPG though, right?
Who is
Infinity Ward? They're making an RPG.
Oh, that's cool. That's exciting.
So, yeah, maybe that's something that Xbox can really get involved in. But I agree. I think they're going to leave Call of Duty as
that
is.
would fit. I'm looking something up real quick. That would fit. Yeah. Because, yeah, it's like, I love the idea of owning Raven, getting Hexen put back on the map, although they own Hexen. Anyone can do Hexen if they wanted to. But the idea of like kind of liberating one and putting them back together, it's really romantic. But I just...
So help me God, if Phil brings back Hexen before a Fallout remaster of some kind, I'm going fucking scorched earth. I'm going... They will not hear the end of me. Like that would be disgusting.
Quick question. Quick question. Gut reaction. Fallout 3 remaster. Will it come to PlayStation?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes.
Yeah. Just because of what they've done with
Skyrim? Yeah. That makes sense.
I think you'll probably get better feature quality. I think it'll be a lot like, say, Fallout 4. Like, console mods will be better over if they do that, by the way. That would be better over on Xbox, just given the rule set that PlayStation laid out for that type of stuff. I think would be the difference maker in the terms of quality.
Dustin Furman, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means blank for the Xbox brand.
So, unfortunately, a lot of this was what I think you and Chris had just covered, but I wrote responsibility. And I can kind of angle this slightly a different way, is that there's a lot of responsibility you guys are talking about, the management of the studios, and there's a huge responsibility there to your people. But I think in addition to that is the responsibility over now all of the IP as well. And to Xbox's credit, I think, as I was saying earlier, they recently, I think, got a little bit of a rude awakening and have acknowledged this, where I think that in some ways they were tying themselves close to Bethesda, having the Xbox Bethesda showcase and stuff like that. And then with Redfall, Phil kind of had to be like, well, we kind of were hands off, but we should have been, right? So there is a lot of responsibility when it comes to now think about, I wrote down just like Call of Duty, Crash, Spyro, Diablo, Warcraft, StarCraft, Overwatch, like all these IP. And so this is the double-edged sword of this situation, is that this IP can make you so mighty, right? It's a big, big sword to carry that you can really do some damage with. But with that, any mistakes along the way, at least we've seen, it's that like with Redfall, a lot of people, I mean, there was some finger pointing at Bethesda, but now it's like, man, Xbox and Microsoft is going to take the heat for everything. So what I'm just saying is like the responsibility over these IPs. And like I said, I want to give them credit that it's like, I think that there's a lot of painful lessons learned along the way. And we've seen acknowledgement of that, which I think is great. So it's just the question is like this giant sword of IP, how are they going to wield it? Will it be effective? And can they use it without cutting themselves too much?
Yeah. It's going to be, sorry, Chris, you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was just, because as he was talking, I was thinking back to like when Phil basically tossed Arcane under the bus. It totally,
yeah,
that was such a bizarre, like immediately too, like within the week, it was just like, yeah, we shouldn't have put that out, or it's like, what? Holy hell.
Yeah, I think that we can all agree, and say if you don't, that Sony first party would have never released a game like Redfall. It would have gotten canceled a long time ago. They don't have there's never, like, I can't even think of a game like that. That's like Knack maybe would be the last time like a game that was like not like got just destroyed at a first party.
What was that Black Tiger game?
That's a third party.
I know, I'm being messy.
But yeah, that game. That's more about quality control on the third party front.
You do have one, Colin. I just remembered. Destruction All Stars.
Destruction All Stars.
They did end up saying like, yeah, we're just going to give this away for free.
Yeah, to be fair,
PlayStation Plus.
But again, Destruction All Stars is a second party game.
I forgot about that.
And also second party, but still there under their
their control.
Also, Destruction All Stars just kind of sucked. Like it wasn't completely unfinished in the same way, I think.
I'm not really sure that if you put Destruction All Stars gameplay in front of me, I'd even be able to tell you what it was, like if I was looking at it or not. Like you would just simply be like, is this or Destruction All Stars, or is this some epic game that's like on free to play game?
Yeah, that art style hurt that game for sure. Yeah.
All right, my answer to this, number one, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means the heat is on for the Xbox brand. This was said earlier. There are no more excuses. Yeah. I think that after the Bethesda purchase, which was in itself unprecedented in its value in our space, in the console space specifically, although, the Activision Blizzard merger itself was $15 billion or something like that back when it happened. There's simply no more excuses. The fact that people are talking about what more they're going to eat up is so funny to me. It's like, what else do you want? Like, why would you even need more than this? I made the argument on the Xbox podcast I appeared on last week that, and I mean this earnestly, that the next target for Microsoft should 100% be Embracer Group. If you care about, I think A-level IP is the future of Game Pass. I think that there's some confusion about this, that like there's going to be a flood of AAA games on Game Pass, and it's simply not going to happen. Like it at least not now. Call of Duty itself won't even be on it until 2025, and you have to go out and buy these publishers and developers in order to get those games directly from first and second party, because you're not going to be able to get them from third party. And I think that is going to be a meaningful thing, a meaningful kind of stick in the spokes for their relationship with publishers and stuff moving forward. But that's an aside. I think that they have to now deliver. Like, they have to deliver on value, they have to deliver on quality, they have to deliver on consistency. And I just think that for a company to come in, I don't think people really think about this. Like, and I was saying this on another show, that this deal in the console space is probably worth more than every single acquisition that has ever happened combined in the entire games industry. Because you're talking about deals. So like, for instance, when Sony bought Psygnosis, in 1993, I think it actually happened in 1992, they paid something like $35 million for them.
Yeah.
We even know that big developers like Insomniac at their prime went for 229. Now we know that companies like Ninja Theory go for 180 million or whatever, 130 million, whatever it was. So just
it was 118.
118.
Yeah.
Magnify that out to all the different acquisitions that have happened. We're in a very M&A rich spot right now. And of course, mergers and acquisitions in Japan have happened with basically all the major Japanese companies that are not Capcom and Sega, because that their names reflect all of those mergers. But this deal is really worth more than all of that. And so with it should come some really seismic level moves that will beget that sort of deal. Otherwise, what was the point? You see this in an email. See, the most fascinating part of this to me, and you guys might agree, of this entire deal, in my opinion, was seeing everyone's emails, because it's not even what they're saying on the stand or in depositions that are important, although that's important. You can prepare for that and obfuscate. They never expected anyone to see those emails.
Yes, correct.
Right? There was no preparation for that. So you see the way they really, really feel, which is why I take Matt Booty really seriously when he says, like, we can spend them out of business. Yeah, we know that's how you feel. Like, you said that in an email that you didn't think anyone was gonna see. And on the same token, you see someone
Ryan said, like, we ain't worried. So
exactly.
So both sides we got to see.
Right, exactly. Showing complete confusion as to why they would even do it. Right. I think Jim Ryan was saying something like they literally could have spent $5 billion and gotten 3 Call of Duty games straight up exclusive without having to buy the cow at all. Why wouldn't you just do that? And there is something to that, Cog, because I think Activision's profit was something like $2 billion. So last year, so Microsoft just paid them a massive sum of money, like worth, like way above and beyond what I think the market might otherwise dictate. And so I think that they just have to make this work, because they're going to look real stupid if this doesn't work, because they just spent so much flipping amounts of money on a deal that seemed unthinkable to really upset the apple cart. You have to get the W. You have to. And anything less than that, I think is going to be a disappointment. And I wonder how that goes. So I think the heat is on for the Xbox brand personally. Now, since Dustin, you said something that was interesting to me about how by the time we got to you, we had kind of said some of the stuff you wanted to say. So I'm going to move up one person now in the rotation, and we'll start from there. So Cog, I'm going to start with you this time. Number 2, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard should have Sony feeling blank.
Should have them feeling not complacent anymore. I think, look, they have to, at the end of the day, they're going to have to do what I know them to do, which is, to me, which is reflective of Jim Ryan's initial email, which we saw behind the scenes of how he really felt. All this crying and complaining and fraudulent behavior about we cannot exist without Call of Duty. We saw what you felt. We'll be fine. You know what I'm saying? The quote was something like that,
more than fine.
More than fine. That kind of thing. I'm trying to pull up what the quote was.
Dude, I have so many notes from this fucking thing at this point that I already can't even, it's like the beautiful mind over here. Like, I can't even keep up with any, I don't even bother looking at my notes anymore. So I know the email you're speaking of.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it too. But yeah, it's that. So to me, it's more of, I know Sony. And what I fell in love with Sony was PlayStation 1. It was this aggressive company that came out. Crash was in front of Nintendo's building. We are here. You know what I mean? We are not afraid of you, big bad Nintendo. And guess what? We have our own IPs. We're developing our own studios. We're building all this stuff up. And we're taking the CD era into, CD game into the next era. So that's the PlayStation I fell in love with. And they did weird and unusual things, but it was fun. And what I respected was they also innovated. They also had power. I remember the System 11 board with Tekken, and it was the same thing in my house. I remember seeing Ridge Racer in the arcade, and there was the first time I felt they were arcade perfect ports before, but PlayStation to me represented, okay, PlayStation 1, no, this is the future. This is the next generation, the 3D generation, right? That's what and it was aggressive. It was, they weren't fearful. And the thing that I learned that I feel with all this is that I don't like complacent Sony. I don't like when Sony gets too far ahead. And even though I am the leader of the hashtag Just One movement for Xbox, we have to be clear that on the Sony side, they have become complacent with that is the formula of game, and we're going to keep giving you that. Whether it be a remaster or whatever. I miss the SOCOMs, the Resistances. I miss Sony that actually cared about multiplayer and wanted to compete with the Killzone and all that stuff. So it's like, that's what I want to see. Enough of the complaining, enough of the fraudulent behavior. Be the beast that you are and get in the door. And to me, they're starting to show signs, which is the Bungie acquisition. That to me is a direct response. Like, oh, okay, you know what we got to do? We need someone here to look at our portfolio. Let's get factions, together, because clearly they don't even have that expertise anymore. They looked at Naughty Dog and said, that's not it. You have to repackage that. You have lost an idea. And we want to make profit out of this. So I just miss that diverse, for as much as people complain about Xbox's AAA output, you can't deny the diversity of that lineup. You may say, hey, I don't like Pentiment, or I don't like Grounded, but those are good games. It's just that they haven't had the AAA game, that defining game yet. And that's what they hope to. But from the Sony side, do what you do best, be the lion that you are. And I think, like Jim Ryan said, they will be fine.
Yeah, I agree with you that they need to, well, let me say this. I don't want to get too ahead of it and get into what I was going to say. So I'll say this, that you make a really great point about lost expertise. We bring this up all the time. We talk about it and lament it a lot, that Sony lost a lot of their first person shooter expertise when the people that wanted to make Killzone, which were some of the people at Guerrilla, left, right? When they were making Horizon, because like you go to the studios where they're making the games you want to make, and Sony has what I would consider unrivaled expertise in third-person action RPGs and I don't want to say third-person shooters because that's not really true. They're not really great third-person shooters from a mechanical standpoint necessarily compared to some of their peers. So they have this very limited, and then they kind of squander Media Molecule, right? They do other things that the differentiators are no longer able to deliver for them, and I think that is a big problem, and it does feel complacent. And I do feel like Sean Layden was a canary in the coal mine more than it. When he left Sony and said things, no one read it as literal. It was like, oh, this is a man kind of prognosticating on his way out, telling you some things to think about as he goes into retirement or goes into consultation or whatever. It's like, no, he's telling you like what the situation at Sony was. Games are too expensive. We can't afford to make them anymore like this. And that was reflected in the games that got greenlit. So we're just seeing that now come to fruition. So I think you're absolutely right. Chris, let's go to you. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard should have Sony feeling blank.
I mean, I think it goes a little bit into what Cog was saying, but I would say at least a little bit nervous. I mean, I would say like, because when you look at the Activision deal, I mean, like you said, it's a huge deal. It's the biggest acquisition of its kind, especially of its just of the sheer quantity of IP and the scale of it. It's huge, and that to me indicates that, if this goes through, there's kind of a lot on the table that would easily go through. And so if you're Sony, like that's got to be something that you're thinking about. You got to be thinking like, okay, what's on the chopping block now? Because we know from this entire case, that insane list of potential acquisition targets that Microsoft had, and it listed literally everyone. So, I mean, if I'm Sony, I'm looking at that, I'm thinking like, man, if they got through this, if they got Activision, we gotta start looking. We gotta start looking and seeing what we can do.
Colin, I don't like that. Look at his face. Like, I can see the disgust.
Dude, I hate to break it to you, man. Like I don't like this existence either.
Let's help him through it, Chris.
I don't like this existence either. But like, I mean, like it would be insane for them not to be thinking about that. Like it would be. You'd have to be an absolute lunatic not to think about like, okay, well, how can we? It reminds me of when BioWare was making Anthem, and they were like, "No, you can't look at Destiny." You can't look at what Destiny's doing. It's like, dude, you have to pay attention to what's going on around you if you're gonna compete. And so, I hope that at the very least, I mean, like Cog said, like there is something about a complacent Sony that is kind of unbecoming. It's a little bit unattractive. It's a little boring. And so, the hope is that this inspires at least some anxiety to maybe do things they maybe otherwise wouldn't do. Like maybe step out of this glut of the same type of cinematic game over and over again. Although we just heard about The Last of Us Part 2 remake, so who the fuck knows?
Dude, like I'm gonna say, I'll keep my powder dry
Yeah,
for that, just because I
we'll
can't.
keep
I don't know
that.
how much more I can take.
Yeah.
Although,
we'll keep it, but yeah,
that's like one of my favorite games of all time. But I don't. It just came out, and I'm pretty sure it has a PS5 patch.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I don't
don't
know
worry.
that
native
we.
port though.
I don't know.
Not native, true.
yeah, it's not. The box doesn't have a white stripe on the top.
Yeah.
No, they haven't charged you the $10 upgrade fee yet.
that would literally be the only difference. By the way, literally, it would be like, oh, this box has a white stripe at the top that says PS5.
At least it'll give me
That's
a
the only-
reason to, another trophy list. I won't. I want to say no to that.
Yeah.
Requires 2 playthroughs if it'll be the same. But yeah, Chris, you make some interesting points, and I'm going to get into some of the things you were discussing, because I'm right on with you about some of their passivity and what seems to be like this holier than thou attitude that Sony has. Whether or not they have it or not, it comes off that way. There's no other way it can possibly come off, because you refuse to talk to anyone. But I'll get into that in a little while. Dustin, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard should have Sony feeling blank.
I want to put an emphasis on your thing where it says should, okay? Because I don't know if this is how they do feel.
Italicize it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is how they should feel. They should feel re-energized to fight again. And this is, I think this is probably the common thread amongst all of us. My problem is I don't know if they are. Right now, we are in, I don't want to say PS3 levels of cocky Sony, but so far, the PS5 generation, I think they have delivered really well on content so far. That's been great. They've done what they do best, these big AAA blockbuster titles, right? Mm-hmm. But as I just joked about a few minutes ago, we're in the nickel and diming era of Sony too, where it's just little things here and there, $10 upgrade fees, stuff like that. And in addition to I don't know. It's funny because even though it's been weeks out, the last 2 weeks, I've thought a lot about Sony's showcase, I think, in light of us talking about live service stuff. And it's like, I think that I don't think there's like a massive turnaround for the Series X this generation or Xbox. And I think Xbox knows that too, that there's not going to be, this deal isn't going to shift things immediately. But there's always another generation where it's decision time, right? Decision 2027, Xbox or PlayStation. And I think that they need to be thinking about that now when it comes to, there was that stat that I don't remember exactly right now, but that came out through all the court cases where it was like, this percent of PlayStation players only play Call of Duty. This percent play 80% Call of Duty. And so when it's time for them to decide which console to buy, and they were like, well, I can get Game Pass on this, and that includes Call of Duty. They need to make sure that they have every reason to keep that person outside of that. And so they need to fight. Sony is best when they're fighting for first place. We saw that with PS4 and how much they fought. And at the beginning of PlayStation as well, like Cog was mentioning with Nintendo, Sony is best when they're fighting. And they are at their worst when they are cocky, aka PS3. So they should feel energized, but I am concerned that Sony's like, hey, we're still outselling by a long shot. We're good. We're more than fine. In the words of Jim Ryan, we're more than fine. But they got to start fighting now, I think.
We got foam stars.
Yeah.
They sure do. Good Lord. I think you're getting into a lot of interesting stuff. I don't want to tip my hat to what I'm going to say, so I'll leave it for me. But I think you're right on with a lot of your analysis. The PS3 is the early PS3 era is an emblematic time, and not only the only difference between those two eras is that they were both not delivering and they were assholes, right? So there are quotes like, "We'll sell 10 million units without one game." I think was one of the quotes.
Get that second job.
Yeah, and you'll get a second job to afford a PS3, right? Which is just you can't. When people give Don Matrick,
imagine saying that now, dude.
Right.
Holy hell!
That would probably be like a literal fireable offense, actually. For a C-suite executive at this point. But they said that at they were literally coming off of a console that would end up selling 150 million units that they thought was untouchable. It ends up that it's not untouchable, which makes it even crazier. Anyway, Maddie, let's go to you. Microsoft, I'll just present it for the audience in case they forgot. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard should have Sony feeling
wary. Kind of touches on what a couple of things we've talked about already, but the reason I wrote wary, I'll go from a different angle here, is I read something kind of interesting. I think Stephen Totillo posted it, and it's that Minecraft, Call of Duty are some of the biggest games on PlayStation right now. And now both of those are going to be owned by Xbox. So for PlayStation to get their main third-party breadwinners, they need to do business with Xbox. And I think about that if the shoe were on the other foot, to spit out two games from my mind. If Xbox needed to get God of War and Ghost of Tsushima, again, I know horrible examples, but the idea being Xbox having to do business with PlayStation directly to get their big money makers, they'd probably be like, whoa, this can change at any moment. Like right now, 10-year agreement for Call of Duty. What happens? I've said it before. I'm like, when that new regime for Xbox comes in, right now you have pro gaming corps at Xbox, just like the PS4 generation. You had Sean Layden, you had Andrew House. Like you had these guys who just got it. And Xbox has that. They have people who get it. But when the suits come in, you get a Jim Ryan at Xbox in like 10, 15 years. PlayStation should be wary. Like this ain't going to be the same forever. They could, I don't know if they ever will, but they could pull the rug out from under us and then we're left with nothing. And then do we risk going out of business? So I think they just need to be cautious that they're kind of eating out of Microsoft's hands in a way here. Mm-hmm. And that's probably not what you want to do. You want to control your own destiny. And I think that's why they're investing in live service. I think that's why, you get someone like Bungie. I don't know if it was we'll see when, Factions comes around, but I don't know if it was a mistake to just full on scrap what they seem to be, maybe not full on, that's a little extreme, but scrapping to some degree what they were working on with Factions just because Bungie said no, because I know Bungie gets live service, but at the same time, I think, Naughty Dog's earned the right to launch what they think is good. They don't put out bad stuff, and they've done multiplayer well. So, we'll see if they're overreacting. But I think they should be wary. I don't know if they need to overreact, though, because they're doing the best they really ever had in a lot of ways. And so I think they just need to be aware of where their money's coming from, which they are, and how you can circumnavigate that to the best of your ability so that the money that's coming into your pocket is from stuff you produce or partners that are not your direct competitor, whether they like to pretend, oh, it's Google and Amazon and I get you want to kind of keep them on the outside of the walls, but this is one of your main competitors. And I don't think doing business with them all the time via third party for your main revenue generators is probably the ideal recipe for success, because that goodwill that we want everyone playing everything everywhere, as they put it. I think Brad Smith posted on Twitter, like, since this acquisition started, it's always been about getting everybody to play wherever they want, when they want. Just like, give me a break, man. They just, I think, got to be really aware of doing a deal with the devil, maybe. Microsoft's a big corporation at the end of the day. So they could I wouldn't say easily, but start to kind of tighten the noose a bit and say, all right, you want this? Get Game Pass on your console then, kind of something like that. So,
tactics.
I think they could get squeezed a bit here. And if they want to avoid that, I think they just need to be aware right now, like, okay, things are going to change. We're kind of give yourself at that 10-year timeline to make a game plan to put yourself in a better position for success. So that's what I'd say. Wary. They should feel wary.
For me, good stuff, by the way. Number 2, for me,
thank you.
Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard should have Sony feeling aggressive.
That was originally my answer.
Yeah, and I think it's a reason. I had actually a series of them too. It could have gone in many different directions, because I think one of them was existentially threatened. Was another like you can take it in definitely any direction, but to try to be more constructive, because I feel like we're so destructive about Sony's reaction to this. So like, can I be constructive in some way? It's like, all right, like you have to be aggressive. You know what you're dealing with now. I know some people took umbrage with this when I said that there's no way Sony has a list of developers like Microsoft had a list of developers to buy. And I stand by that. I think people were saying that I said that Sony has no developers they want to buy. Like, that's not what I said. I said that Sony doesn't have a fucking list of 120 developers they want to buy because they've never operated like that. But they see full well now the kind of people they're operating with, so that while they're trying to mature relationships in a more economically responsible way because they have to, they can't just go out and buy things unseen. It's too dangerous for a company of their size. They kind of can't do that anymore. And it's going to be even hard for me as like kind of an advocate for the way that they've done business for a long time, because I think it works for the creative aspect of the company. I think it's materially obvious for the last 15 years that PlayStation Productions is, or what we would knew as SCE back in the day and all of that, is an amazing group of studios that make amazing games. And I don't want to upset that too much. But as we said with Sean Layden, he was saying that these games, remember, Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 were all released on the same generation platforms. You know, it's amazing. And it's not like Uncharted 1 even came out when PS3 came out. It came out the next year. So they actually didn't even have something at launch, and they still got everything out, plus The Last of Us, all on the same platform at that studio. It just doesn't work like that anymore. And the reality is that no matter how much I dislike it, and I really fucking do, I don't want them to do it. They got to go buy things. They have to, because I think that it would be suicidal for them not to. And I think they realize, and it was said, Hiroki Totoki, the CEO, or I guess he would be the president, noted, the Sony president noted that they were going to go after IP. And I think that that's smart. One of the things I was saying to Stoller on our podcast together was, because he was a little confused about how things worked, and I think he was a little off base about some of the things he was saying, where I was like, Sony doesn't own the third-party exclusives that they're getting. They just make deals for them. And this was a fact of life that Microsoft readily took part in for many years, from Ninja Gaiden to KOTOR to BioShock to Titanfall to Rise of the Tomb Raider. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. Both sides played this game. They got weird ones, like Sony wasn't allowed to have Tales of Vesperia on PS3 for many years, right? Because of deals that Microsoft made. They were not opposed or above those deals. And those weren't second party deals. Those were third party deals, even Mass Effect 2. You know, so people forget it or just don't know or don't think about those things. That Sony's not fighting a different fight by getting Final Fantasy 16. That's the way business was often done. And Microsoft was the most aggressive during the Xbox 360 era of doing that. And as I said before, I think they even made some deals aggressively with games like Titanfall. And I think EA wished they could unwind that deal because it was made with such a confidence that Xbox 360, much like they did with a bunch of other third-party games, would continue to be able to do something like that, which they were no longer able to do. So I think the tit for tat thing is a lot more existent than people acting like Sony's just punching Microsoft in the face with third-party exclusives as if that never happened before. I think that that's weird. And I think that kind of comparing the level of exclusives that the two sides has is a little disingenuous when most of the exclusives that PlayStation has are not paid for by Sony. It's studios and publishers deciding they don't want to publish on Xbox. And that's different. You know, there are some games that Sony goes and says like, yeah, we don't want you to release, we want you to release later. But people really do have to understand that there is a decaying market of buying games on Xbox. It just is true. And that too is going to keep things away. It's not always Sony's fault that that's happening, because if people think, and I'm telling you this as someone who owns a small developer and knows how expensive it is for us, so I can only imagine how expensive it is for them. You don't just put your games on platforms. It doesn't just happen. You have to like produce it. You have to port it. You have to deal with the company. You have this whole conduit open, a new pipeline open for patching and all this other stuff. It's very complicated. And so if you're going to go to a platform and say like, well, we're a big company and we think we're only going to sell 10,000 copies here and it's just not worth our time, that's why games don't come over.
But also to push back, they also have language and verbiage to say that it cannot come on Game Pass, which is their service. So there's still, even though I agree that there is tit for tat in the previous generations, in the PlayStation 4 generation and PlayStation 5, I mean, I feel like they have been very aggressive with that. Documents have come out as far as the actual language saying you cannot put that in Game Pass. So I agree. I agree that it's not just easy to put it on another platform, but I do feel that Sony does pay attention to what is zeitgeist and make sure that it stays on their platform.
Yeah, but going on Game Pass and going on Xbox, I guess, are two different things. And I guess
Correct.
the argument I'm making is that there's not really a viable on Xbox path, or at least that path is shrinking.
Yes,
You know,
I would agree.
And that's, I guess, the argument I'm making. So it's not necessarily going to Game Pass or not. I believe the publishers, when the big publishers, when they say they don't want to go put their big games on Game Pass day and date, I believe them. And that they put games like Exoprimal on Game Pass because they're very happy to take Microsoft's money and hedge their bets on a game they don't think is going to make any money anyway. You know, they're going to keep their moneymakers to the side. That's a whole nother argument, though, that we'll get. Yeah, I'm sorry, please.
No. I actually agree.
Oh,
with
yeah.
that.
So
it's not to the advantage of the AAA big blockbuster game to justify putting their game on Game Pass, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to justify that cost and how much money Microsoft's got to give you to recoup. So yeah, I completely understand that. Where they are right now, completely agree with where you're at.
And so I just want to I'll wrap it up by saying that I think that they should be aggressive in multiple ways, because I think that, first of all, they got exposed by Microsoft in a lot of different ways during this ordeal, in ways that matter, that I think they don't think matter. And I think that they also need to read the tea leaves carefully about things like Call of Duty, prognosticating off of data they'll already have on MLB The Show, which I'll get into in a second, that I think actually bodes fairly well for them. Although it gets to Maddie's point that you're kind of doing a deal with the devil in this way. The first is that Microsoft is very aggressive about their optical game, and they have been for a long time. And for some reason, Sony just stopped caring, as if it doesn't matter. And I think it's a huge mistake. I know people there, and I know that they were getting, the people that, Gio Corsi's and all those guys of the world were getting yelled at behind the scenes for the things that they were, when Gio Corsi had his Vita on the stage, I don't know if you guys remember that, on PSX, and held it up and all that, he got in trouble for that. He got in a lot of trouble for that,
Wow.
And so this,
he did the right thing.
Because they were like, because behind the scenes, they're like, we're trying to kill this thing, and we're not supposed to be celebrating it, and there's just no off the, and I think that really tamped down what was happening, what was bubbling with Shuhei Yoshida, back with Jack Tretton, who was a really accessible person. Sean Layden was much more accessible during the first half. In fact, I interviewed him right when he came on at IGN, and we did a multi-hour interview together, and then he just kind of stopped talking. And now they think that they need to talk to GQ, and they need to talk to all these things. It's like Wired. Who the fuck reads Wired? What are you guys doing? You need to be on social media. You need to, I make fun of him, but it's smart with that Florian Mueller guy. It's like Microsoft's paying this dude. This dude is setting the cadence for, he's accurate, and I'm not saying he's not, but he's being paid to do this, right? He's involved, and he admits it himself on it's like, you got to go and fight back in some way, and get some messaging going, and seem like you care at all about what's happening. I think it's smart that they have Phil Spencer, and they have Sarah Bond, and they have Matt Booty, and all these people tweeting. You couldn't even tell me who the fuck some of the, I know Scott Rhodey. I like Scott Rhodey. I consider him a really nice guy, and a long time, been accessible was accessible to me for a long time, not so much anymore. But you don't hear from him. You've never heard from him. And that level of insight would be really helpful right now. The audience is kind of yearning, I guess, in some way. The hardcore audience is kind of yearning for some level of guidance. What are you doing out here? And
100%. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Because you're all fine. You're cooking. I just want to jump in for a second. Is because I completely agree, because, this is a conversation that I actually had with Jaffe, behind the scenes. And it's just having the pictures and all that stuff, because they are making, to me, the correct decision with Xbox executive leadership to ingratiate themselves with their base. They know they are behind. It behooves you to actually, ingrace with your fan base. And this is the worry when we talk about the PS3 era and the arrogance, is that we know you're the market leader, but to not have any communication. I come from the PSX era where you could actually go to a fan event for Sony. You could actually reach out and touch them, and it means something. And when you, to your point, it's, I gotta be, it feels, Maddie, I've had a discussion with you. It feels very country club behavior. It's very weird. GQ, we're this, you can't access, kind of thing. And I worry that disconnect, especially now with the situation what we're in, they're going to have to be aggressive. And I hope, to your point, that changes, because I do miss that, Sony, and I do miss the Gio Corsi's coming out and talking to people and just jump on up. Obviously, come on Sacred Symbols, that's your own business. Say you're stupid. It's the #1 PlayStation podcast. But at the end of the day, it behooves you to talk to someone, to let the people know how you, especially with the discuss, like Dustin was saying, with the nickel and diming, you have to get in front of this stuff. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm sorry, because you definitely sparked some things that I remember going to those, kind of events and stuff like that. I used to really enjoy.
No, I'm glad you said it, and I agree with you. Like, I think it's funny that the PSXs weren't that long ago, and I think they really just make monetary decisions only, and that, of course, is fiduciary and obvious, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense when we make Sony seem like they're a mom and pop operation. Sometimes they're not. PlayStation made $25 billion in revenue last year. They make a lot of money. And just because they're not as big as they're a multinational company too, but just because they're not big as the behemoths of the world doesn't mean that they have no staying power and no value. They can sacrifice or take risks in order to, and maybe make a little bit less or do not as well in this metric in order to send a better message and a more controlled message. And the one last thing I wanted to say in parting is the Call of Duty situation won't come to pass on Game Pass until 2025, as I said before. And so, because Sony has the marketing rights wrapped up until 2024, so it would be hard to see how they could have the marketing rights for a game on Game Pass. I don't know how that would work. But that they don't own, obviously, and MLB The Show would be a different game, I guess. But MLB The Show is the point. I remember when Chris and I did the show by ourselves back in 2019, when MLB The Show was going to go multi-platform. And it wasn't clear at the time what was clear later, which is that the MLB was really the one doing this, right? And we said at the time, though, that what was obvious was that the MLB was basically saying, either you put this game on all the platforms or we're removing the license and we'll give it to someone else that will do that so we can spread the wealth. And what was unfortunate here was that the MLB had no real consideration for Sony and kind of threw dust in Sony's eyes, which people forget, and said, like, we're not even going to control when your primary competitor gets the game and then immediately puts it on Game Pass, right? And this was considered a great insult and a move that would really hurt MLB The Show and really, really help Microsoft. And I do think it's helpful to have MLB The Show, no doubt, on your platform or on your subscription model. But MLB The Show sells better than ever. And the sales of MLB The Show are more impressive now than they were before it was on Game Pass. And the sales explicitly, when they're counted on NPD, don't count Xbox sales at all. Not physical, not digital. So it didn't really work out like that. It's kind of the antithesis of what Maddie was saying with the future Call of Duty deals, where you're dealing with the devil. Any success for MLB's The Show product will have to go mostly to Sony as the developer of the product, and that benefits them. And so with Call of Duty, my gut instinct is to say, like, you aggressively should bite a bullet, a big bullet, man, a really bad bullet, and put it on PlayStation Plus. If, like, the year that it goes to Game Pass, you just say, like, we're putting it on PS Plus. But I look at the MLB The Show stuff and I'm like, I don't know that it matters. They'll probably still sell a ton of copies. And the only thing they have to think about is, to Maddie's point, the 70% is now not going to a third party. It's going to be, netted out. Microsoft will make 60% of the money it would usually make by selling a game on PlayStation. So that's still a benefit to them. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out there. I hope that makes sense. All right, Chris, let's go to you with this next one. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means the video game industry blank
is shrinking. I mean, look, we've been kind of dancing around this topic a little bit, but I mean, we're heading into consolidation central, and I know that there are some ad libs later on that we'll get to a little bit more in depth with that. But this is kind of the road that we're on is a road of concerningly fewer and fewer entities owning more and more entities. I think that's going to continue, and I don't really see any way that's going to stop it. Like I said earlier, if this went through, then there's a lot on the table. And what that ultimately means is there are fewer people who have their own ecosystems. Basically, it's like it's a way different environment than we had, I would say, even 5-6 years ago. And it's a way different environment than the game industry that we're hoping to see revived by something like this. Like when we talk about all these like IP that are hoping to like come back, and there's
prototype.
Yeah, prototype.
Hey guys,
Dude, man,
don't talk
Shots.
smack. Don't talk
Shots.
smack.
you can eat people in that game.
You
You
can.
can.
That's true.
That's
It's
awesome.
beautiful. It's a thing
But-
of beauty.
It's a thing of beauty. But you know, I don't know. Like I don't know. I feel like this is more of a jumping off point than anything, because I really feel like there was something to be said about the fact that, you know, about the fact that it's ultimately getting smaller. And when you look at Embracer Group and how much that had to really shave away, like Activision has a lot of IP right now, and they have like a lot of studios, but at a certain point, there's probably going to be some consolidation within that even. And I mean, we even saw that before Microsoft even owned it or even made a ploy in buying it. We saw, you know, great studios who were making other games kind of folded into the Call of Duty machine. And the fact that there are fewer and fewer places to go outside of that type of ecosystem is, you know, it's concerning, because where do you go? IO? You know, like there's fewer and fewer independent extraneous like developers and publishers out there to choose from, and that is a point of concern. But it's also the inevitable direction of where things are going, as they have gone in every other. I mean, there's that famous graph of, you know, how many companies own all the other companies, and it's like a hilarious. It's like a hilariously small number of companies if you really boil it down to like individual, like unique entities who control everything. It reminds me a little bit about how I think was it Pepsi that bought Pizza Hut or something?
Yeah.
Because Coke couldn't compete or whatever, so they just had
And
to
that still has
force it.
ramifications to this day, I think, through Taco Bell and other brands. I think, like
Yeah,
Pepsi.
literally. Like, so
KFC.
they couldn't compete with Coke, so they had to buy restaurants and force those restaurants to only serve Pepsi. And that's like a real thing. And people
Low-key
think about
brilliant,
it.
actually, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's insidiously smart,
Yeah.
but also it's, I don't know, man. It's there's a tinge of sadness in that, in the fact that, you know, in the fact that you have to have a Pepsi with your Pizza Hut sucks. Like, and I say that as somebody who's not a Pepsi guy, but like that blows, because it's an absence of choice, and that absence of choice is probably going to, in some way, I can't say exactly in what way, because it's such a nebulous industry and it changes so consistently, and there's so many different ways that trends ebb and flow, and I mean, even something as simple as, like, I thought loot boxes would be around way longer than they ended up being. Definitely didn't predict battle passes, so who knows how it's going to manifest itself. But it's a point of concern for me. I don't know if that's echoed. But
No, I think it will be. I think that's why I think it's preposterous when people say that they don't understand. Well, how does Microsoft use Activision as a brand that they can wield to kind of make their products more attractive when they're keeping those products available everywhere else? And I'm like, these are simply bricks and mortar in the wall of the walled garden. It's not like that anything. It's not like it's becoming, you know, smaller. It's just being reinforced, and so it just makes it harder to breach. And the potential mid and long term effects of that are unknown, because we simply don't know how it's going to play out, and that's why it's a little scary, I think. Dustin, let's go to you. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means the video game industry blank.
The consolidation race has begun, truly, now. I think back to, I think, Colin, it was you with Hogue, maybe, where I think you had asked him about, like, once this deal is over, what does this mean? Is this kind of it? Is this the end for Microsoft? And Hogue was like, no. This is the go light to really go full steam ahead to buy whoever else that they want. And I think that I think from what we've seen is going to be continued to be their intent. And as we were talking about earlier, I think Sony knows that it is do or die now. They gotta start buying as well. And we think about two other companies in the mix, like Tencent. Think about Embracer. That really, this consolidation race has already begun. It began years ago, but now this is like the gasoline on the fire, where it's like, okay, anything is on the table, right? Was there any big, other than a platform holder buying another platform holder, right? is there any other bigger possible deal than this? I can't think of one. So really, this was the go-ahead for anything. So ultimately now it's, and we have questions about this later, so I'll keep it brief, but it's just like the question of like, all right, who's next? That is really the question from both sides of, who is going to be Sony's target now that they're kind of forced to do this. And it's unfortunate. And I know that, like, in fairness, I think at least for Sacred is that we've always said we're against this. We will continue to be against it, even if Sony buys my beloved not Squaresoft, From Software, right? I'm not going to celebrate it. Like it's for me, it's like to think of how the PlayStation or how the video game industry just continues to seem more and more like the film industry, where it's like you got Disney and you got Universal. It's like there's just, and they own everything. Thinking about how much like Disney owns with Fox and stuff like that. It's like, man, it's it feels bleak. The future feels bleak in that way to me.
Yeah, I have similar concerns as well, but I'll get to them. Maddie, let me read it one more time for everyone out there. What is this? Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means the video game industry blank.
I'll bring us to life a little bit here.
Please.
It will change forever, but I don't necessarily think in a bad way. So to grab one example of dozens, the way I look at it is, so Playground Games, one of Xbox's most successful first-party studios. Gavin Rayburn was the studio head of that place. They launched their biggest game in Forza Horizon 5. He left and revealed the new AAA studio in Lighthouse Games, which is, it sounds like they're going to be making a racing game. And so my school of thought on this, and I think this is just where, we have different perspectives on things. I look at it more like, yeah, it's going to change forever, but that means we're going to continue to see people fly out of their parachutes in the big companies and start up their own because they get to control their own destiny. I don't think gaming will be like, to Dustin's example, and I listened to the show you did with Stoller, Colin, so I know he said the film industry comparison as well. I don't think it's going to be like that because I just feel the floor is higher for gaming independent games. I think the exposure level's there. I think the word of mouth is there. I think there's a different level of passion for games, which I know are all kind of intangible, but I think Game Pass really helps out a lot. Game Pass is the number one spotlight. And before that, I think it was really PlayStation. That there was an era with the Vita and PS Plus where they did a phenomenal job with indie. So I know there's going to be change, and that's why I said it's going to change forever, but I don't know if it's going to get worse. I think in a lot of ways it may actually get better. I think people who worked hard to get to the top are going to get paid, and they don't got to play by the corporate rules. And we're in a time of the most entrepreneurial behavior I think we've seen in economics before, where I feel like people are starting their own businesses over everything, art, games, movies.
Yeah, we would all
sex,
know,
everything. Just everything is a business now.
LSM brand,
right?
Nice.
All of our brands, all of our presences are unusual entrepreneurial economic things that weren't even possible a decade or two ago.
So yeah, to me, I just feel like we're in a different world in the terms of economics. I think, you're going to see a lot of companies we know and love fold on, and there, that's tough, right? There's companies that we grew up with that may fold underneath a brand we do or don't like, and I get all that. I certainly will struggle with the change too, but at the same time, I think when I look at just to pull off the top of the head, Sabotage, right? They're the ones who did Sea of Stars.
Mm-hmm.
They did The Messenger. They're going to keep trying to punch up for their payday to sell off maybe, or maybe never do that, and then leave and go start their own. I just think because the beauty of, not that film and TV isn't like this, but the video games industry is so powerfully creatively driven just by passionate people that I'm of the mindset, and it could be naive to those who disagree with me, and I would totally understand that I feel you're going to continuously have people who want to stop playing by the typical rules, your PlayStation just ones, and go make something more of a passion project with to them higher risk, but that they think will do really well. And I think that's the current. It could change dramatically on this front with Xbox. I think that's the benefit. I know it's sometimes to COG's dismay. We've talked a lot about it on DD, but I personally think it's great that right now Xbox is dropping games like Pentiment and Grind. Not that COG doesn't, by the way. Not to speak for you too much, COG, but just but he wants that just one game at least once, right? But for me, I'm like, I love that we're not getting. I've fallen off PlayStation's exclusives because while they are vastly different from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, it's another third person over the shoulder semi-open world game with some checklist objectives. Nah, I'm okay. I'll pass on that. Now there's again more intricacies to that. Like God of War's combat's phenomenal, so that's like the wrinkle that separates it. Its characters are phenomenal, and so on and so forth. Production value is there, so I get it. But I think it leads to more variety. I think it leads to more creativity. Maybe not consolidation directly, but I think those who get tired of that and want out, like Nate Perkypile, who was the art director for Fallout 76, which I know for many people isn't like a glowing thing to put on your portfolio, but he worked on a ton of other stuff for BGS. Has gone out and he's making his just solo developer, making his own first person game, very Elder Scrollsy looking in my opinion, and it looks awesome. I think Wayward Souls might be the name of the game. Former creators of like the original Elder Scrolls games are making one just like that now. So I just feel people are going to have to look at times a little harder. They're going to have to realize like, oh, that's what I love about gaming is like, if I want something, if I look hard enough, I will literally find it. So I have lesser concerns. It's going to change. It's going to change big time, but I don't think we're going to be fucked, so to say. But that's how I'm looking at it. And again, that's the glass half full energy. Not that Dustin or Chris are wrong or that, they're glass half empty, so to say, but just that I think I definitely share the optimist point of view on a lot of these things. And that can make me look foolish in a year or two, for sure.
I don't even think we'll know in a year or two. I mean, that's the whole thing is, I can only speak for myself, but any concerns I have are mid to long term. Like, I don't think there's almost any downside for anyone in the short term. That's what makes issues complicated, right? That's what makes you can't just and I'm not saying you, but the royal you shouldn't just look at things in the here and now, but how they can the ramifications down the line. And those are the things I'm more worried about. Like, because right now we have people getting great value on Game Pass. We have more games being added to Game Pass, right? Prices, I think, are pretty stable. People are making fun of that they're raising prices and stuff. I'm like, I think the prices seem pretty stable and fair for what they're offering, in my opinion. I think the prices will go up of $16 a month or whatever for what they're offering. I mean, I think we're talking about a Game Pass that's going to cost like a lot more than that in 5 years, based on what they're building. And they have the different tiers, which I think is smart. Folding gold into it, I think is smart. But yeah, so in the short term, the money is fluid. The projects are many, multi-platform agnosticism still reigns, and all of the rest. But I'm compelled by Stoller's argument, and I really recommend people read Matt Stoller's article called "The Slow Death of Hollywood," which he wrote in 2019, and it's a big deal today because he basically predicted what is happening right now back in this essay he did in 2019, and that my personal fears are simply seeing parallel arts and entertainment industries being upended by things that they didn't expect, and that I don't yet see kind of the secondary or tertiary flows of money coming through to save gaming like I do in, say, music, where the money in music's made in touring, the money in music's made in merch. Nothing's going to change about that. Nothing can change about that. In fact, accessibility only makes it so that you can stream shows and sell them that way. You can do all these events and VIP tickets and all that. People are making more money touring than ever. So in fact, music was really actually beneficially helped in some way by subscription services. I don't see the secondary and tertiary routes for gaming. That's why I'm so concerned about the mid and long-term funding of them, because, I'll save it for mine. Cog, let's go to you. Number 3, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means the video game industry blank.
Remains competitive. For me, especially
so
as
elegant,
consumer.
so elegant. Can I just love you for a moment here?
Oh,
thank you, brother. Just so well spoken.
Thank you, brother. I mean, I just got to speak from selfish Cog. As a consumer, got to speak selfishly. This is what I am here for. I go to the dealership. There's a good deal at the lot. I see the car I like. You offered it for this price, for this range. Yes, please. That's my goal. My focus is as a consumer of video games first. And when I look at this deal, and I look at Game Pass, it's not even close. They're the best deal in gaming. It's not even close. What is being offered now, will it remain that way until the long-term point? Absolutely great points. But I have to think right now as a gamer, what does it mean? It means that Call of Duty, which I have not played in a long time. I used to be that guy, after Halo. I actually betrayed Halo for Call of Duty during the Vince Zampella days, the Infinity War days. 60 frames, knocked my socks off. But look, this is more people are going to get access to this game. That's a zeitgeist game from my youth that still is going on. Nintendo is going to get access. I'm curious to see how with that new Nintendo that they got that's supposed to be a PS4/Xbox One that Bobby Kotick kind of snitched out. But, we'll see how that works out. But look, at the end of the day, Nintendo is going to get access. They haven't had access to it in a long time. Multiple streaming platforms are going to get access to it. How that works about latency, Chris, we'll talk about that another day. But at the end of the day, more people are going to get access to it. So this is how I look at it. It's a disruptive game. It kind of reminds me, there's parallels, to Fortnite with the cross-play, cross-save, cross-progression. Again, that stuff kind of excites me. As a person who likes live service games and likes multiplayer games, to me, the key is the online population and engagement. You have more people playing it. The games I love live on. So this, to me, again, I know it's short-term thinking for some people, but I also think about the online longevity. And then we got to talk about the mobile aspect. Call of Duty Mobile is huge. I don't care about it, but it's huge. It's there. It's a factor. Whether they segment off, I remember they did this with Fortnite at one point, and maybe Chris, you remember, is Fortnite's lobby, they may have to separate Switch and mobile and put y'all in this pocket and leave it with big boys over here with PC and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So to me, this is engagement. This is where gaming is going. The cloud is the backbone, the infrastructure. And, again, I have to look at myself as a consumer. Microsoft's first party, Activision's entire catalog. That is huge to me. And $15 core, whatever it is, sign me up. Sign me up. Yeah, we got to hold them accountable. We got to watch the quality, no doubt. We have to think long term, and we'll get into it with the other points. But my short term answer is this is good for competition. And last point I'll say, this is the third place company. I know it's still Microsoft, big trillion, but they are third in gaming. They are not. So to me, again, helping them try to make ground, even though, yes, people say, hey, they just buying their way. Fair. But it does make third place try to compete with first place. And to me, from a pure balance standpoint and legal standpoint, nothing illegal here. This is competitive.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I don't know, man. It's so funny to think about. I was reading about it actually after Stoller brought it up, which is just this thing called theory of price, which is just this basic economic law, I guess, that demand and price should always reflect exactly supply and demand. And if there's a reason that price doesn't reflect supply and demand, then there's a reason for it. Either it's being pulled in some specific direction and money outside of that equation is affecting its value. And that's when things get unbalanced in one direction or the other. And I guess that leads into my answer here, which is Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard means the video game industry is at an inflection point. I don't see how the economics of a subscription service can make for great games in a continual way without you paying a lot for it unless it's being subsidized. And this was, of course, the argument that the FTC was making about Game Pass. They failed to make that argument. But it's why because people are always confused, and I know that it comes up. It's like, Colin, why do you care so much about if Game Pass is working at a profit or not? I'm like, I care because it means that it's natural. It's not being boosted by something else. It's not artificial. And if an artificial new economic structure is built with money coming from the outside, then it forces other companies to react in a way that is unnatural in order to compete on this unnatural plane. And it sucks. It's a teetering tower. And I don't understand how people my detractors don't seem to quite understand that argument, that it's vital that they work out. It works on its own. It's vital because though it's their competitive right to do it, although Stoller had argued that it's not necessarily your competitive right to just dump money from a winning project into a losing project. It's just that stuff's not often fought. It just means that we should be really uncertain. Like we all wonder how you can possibly make it work, right? Like, does anyone think that $15 a month works? Especially like bringing Call of Duty in, bringing all these other things. Like it can't. That to me requires a level of scale that they're not even close to yet. And we don't know their numbers. And by the way, shout out to them. Brilliant marketing.
Brilliant move.
Yeah. Brilliant coup de grace on the subject of Game Pass subscribers.
Game Pass
Right.
core. Yeah, absolutely.
So now I imagine they'll report numbers again, and they'll obfuscate those numbers just like Sony used to do with Vita by putting them in the PSP's numbers to say like PSP and Vita sold this much. And no one still no one to this day really knows how much Vita sold. They're all guesses. So
Not enough.
So I thought that was it. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Brilliant marketing. And I was always wondering when they were going to shut off Gold. You know, because Lilimo just sold 2 of our games to Games with Gold. We just were talking about that on a recent show. And so our games might be amongst the last games. I think they're only available in South Korea and maybe other places. But so I think that was a really brilliant move. And so but nonetheless, I think the inflection point comes in just how we pay for games. And it really matters. And it's worth serious thought. It's not worth flippancy and fanboyism. It's really not. Because we know that no matter what happens, in my opinion, it's going to be deeply disruptive. And it could be deeply disruptive in a good way, but we need to understand how we get to that point and not just assume that we get to that point. Because as I noted, we saw music really and the record industry really get gutted. But in fact, it really didn't cost the big players much of anything. My friend Ramon, who everyone knows does our music for our show, is a professional touring musician and a studio musician. And he always says that, like, you know, you would be so surprised. Like we use the band Helmet as an example, or he does, which is like an early 90s kind of like rock band where they got like $1 million deal from some record label. And he's like, that's the kind of deal you would just never, ever, 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 ever see again. But Helmet was able to still tour and make much more money than that touring even then. And the proliferation of their music, though it hurts them in the short term, actually helps their longevity and their ability to make lots of money by touring, going to festivals and all the things that have grown so much in the 21st century. Touring was always something that was big, but Chris, you would know, like the Beatles didn't tour at all, like the last half of their careers. Like they didn't go anywhere. They didn't play any of the shows. Like so a lot of those songs, their most famous songs, have never been played live. And I find that fascinating, but it's not like that anymore. So music survives, right? And then I see TV and film, and this is where we're at now, right? And TV and film is collapsing. I don't think people actually appreciate how much it's collapsing. Because of the strikes, it's exposing really deep seams between those that run the streaming services and their idealism for streaming services, and how that idealism runs into the reality of being an actor, the reality of being a writer, the reality of working on a production and needing the residuals, and how much more profitable the old way of doing business was for the people in that equation that really matter, which are the people that are making the content, right? Mm-hmm. And so I look at that and I say, now we've thrown the dice again. So we threw the dice with music and it kind of worked out. Okay, cool. Now we're back at the table and we're throwing the dice again. And I'm like, these dice are in play, dude. I have no idea how this is going to come up. I've been reading stuff about this being like, this is going to be a significant problem. Like what's happening now. I don't know if you guys read SAG-AFTRA released like their demands and then the responses to the demands. Did you guys see this? Mm-hmm, and a lot of them were like denied or something like that. Like they're not even on the same page, not even remotely on the same page of what they're asking for. And we work in an industry that is deeply creative, but has unorganized labor. And so if anything, I think that we are at an even deeper inflection point and a deeper level of danger for mid to long-term labor disruption in the games industry if we don't wrap our arms around the fact that games are expensive and they can't be subsidized. Like we have to pay. You get what you pay for. And if you don't, then what you get are replicants of what we've already seen, the App Store. So what happened from the App Store? You know, race to the bottom. No one wants to pay for anything. Microtransactions and a complete level of quality where there were more games released on days on the App Store than there are in the entire NES catalog. Right? And that's nuts. And we all paid for that in the console space. So I refuse to take the stance that what happens with subscription services, if I don't want to participate with them, won't affect me, because it will. Because what happened on the App Store affected all of us badly. And all of the shit we hate, or much of the shit we hate, comes directly from that space and people's inability to grapple with value there. So I don't want to. I brought these stats up because I just think they're interesting too. About I feel like Game Pass mid to long term, what they're going to learn about it is that they shouldn't make big, expensive games for it. And the reason I think that is because I was looking at some of these numbers. Hi-Fi Rush is 11 hours long, according to according to How Long to Beat or whatever that website's called.
Yeah.
And they say that 2 million people played it. That number's probably more like, what would you say, 2.5 million now or something like that. But let's say it's 2 million people. It's 11 hours long and only 11.4% of the people that played it beat it. Pentiment is 14 and a half hours long with a 7.5% completion rating. Right? But
that game will filter a lot of people, in fairness.
I understand that. And I also understand that the nature of subscriptions there, people are bouncing. We see that on PS Plus games, for instance.
Yeah,
but these are new products, right? Mm-hmm. Now, Final Fantasy 16 sold 3 million copies. We'll say it's more like 4 million now, I would assume. I think that's fairly safe. It's 35 hours long, which seems very short because I'm like more than twice that long into it. More than 1 million people have beaten that game. 26.1%. Right? Forspoken.
I think that's the nature of subscription services. Kind of like you touched on. Just, people are going to... we had an early write-in. I think when we first started Duke, when it was Cog and I, we had an early initial write-in, like, why are the percentages for completion so low? I'm like, the number count is probably, in most cases, higher, where people are just checking out, and moving on. I actually did that for Soul Hackers, too. Like, I hopped in for 2 hours, collected the first 2 achievements. I was like, later.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that, but it's still dragging data down to the point where it's like, well, if people are just bouncing in and out of games, it doesn't matter if it's fucking 5 hours or 50 hours. They're not even getting through the 11-hour game, the 20-hour game. And I think it's really interesting that Starfield and Fable and all these games Avowed are going to be big ass games. But I wonder if the games will become smaller after that. That's something I'd really keep a close eye on. The only game you would imagine would get bigger was something like Elder Scrolls.
That might work really well for them. Sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting. I'm just saying that actually might work well for them, because I feel like there's an outcry across the industry to make these games smaller. Like, Ubisoft dropping AC Mirage, which is apparently going to be a tighter game from them, which we haven't seen the likes of that in a while, outside of like Mario and Rabbids, which is fantastic. Like, I think that general outcry and maybe them scaling down would be great. But then, again, I think that comes back to creative energy. Like, you got guys like Todd Howard, who, when he was asked in that XCast interview, like, oh, hey, do you want to make smaller games? He's like, nah, I like the big worlds you live in. Like, I think there's just people who want to make those size of games too. So they're going to collect valuable data from it, no doubt, though. It's a good point.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to jump in for a quick second. What Maddie said, in reference to also the flip side is their goal is subscriber count. That's how it's a short, yes, it's a sink short term. It's sunken cost short term. There's no doubt. But the goal is whatever this internal number calculated by people much smarter than me, which is, let's say I'm making up, fix 100 million Game Pass subscribers, 200 million, where it becomes profitable. And I think the part where I will push back is that I hear your point on engagement, but where I differ is that the games that are going to require that level that may drop off, and we have the statistics to prove that. To me, the way they look at you fund that by the games that hardcore gamers don't care about. Like, you would be surprised how much, Minecraft or presumably Candy Crush and all these things that gamers do not care about, that truly fund the backbone of what they plan to do, so that we get those kind of passion projects or those hardcore gamer games that we get. And I understand your point. I don't want to say that your point is not well-founded. I just don't see it as this doom and gloom. The quality of the games industry is going down as a result of that. I don't see that, because at the end of the day, you're still allowing developers to have security and choice. And that is very key, because as we both said, the games industry is very risky. It's very risky. One failure, you're out of here. So, and this is just one ecosystem. You could still go to Nintendo. You could still go to Sony. There's other places to go. It doesn't necessarily mean that this will be like music, the de facto place is the only place you could go. That was the only thing I wanted.
Yeah, I understand all that, and you guys are right, but I don't think I've also fully made my point yet either.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. No,
I interrupted twice. That's on me.
I interrupted twice.
It's all good. I didn't want to interrupt you guys either. I want you guys to flow and do all of that, but I'm presenting these numbers first of all, it's crazy that 3 weeks into a game that's 35 hours long, that a quarter of the audience has already beaten it, and that comes out to almost 1 million people, right? And that Square Enix would look at that number and say like, well, first of all, the game was probably subsidized by Sony. The marketing was probably subsidized by Sony. And they might even have like a better than 70-30 split on the game. I mean, who knows what the deal behind the scenes are. But you look at numbers like that, and I wanted to bring up Forspoken as well, which is a derisive game that probably sold, I don't know, did they ever even say how many copies Forspoken sold? I would say maybe 500,000 copies, right? That would be my instinct. And
God willing.
But 35.8% of the people that bought it, played it, beat it. Now, those numbers matter from, I think, and the argument I was going to make was from attracting talent and attracting studios to want to buy into your space. I think it's less attractive for a studio working on a third party or even timed third party or second party capacity to say like, well, we celebrate how many people play your game or have access to it, but not how many people buy it or how much money we make on it or anything like that. And I think those prestige things matter so that when you have a company like Square Enix saying, well, we just sold 4 million copies of this game and people are playing the shit out of it. And you look at these games and it's like, well, they're good and they're sticky and people by virtue of subscription services duck in and duck out of these games, but they're not sticking around and playing these games. And so if they're not sticking around and playing these, then I simply think that it means that they'll get that games will continue to be shorter because there is, as you said, hedging risk, COG, would be a fundamentally important thing to do here. And it would just make games, I think, in the mid and long term, less meaty, maybe even less high quality because people are just ducking in and out anyway. They don't take on subscription services. I know I feel this way with movies and TV shows. I don't take them as serious as value propositions. They're just fodder. It's like, oh, I don't give a shit. I just stop watching something 20 minutes in or whatever. Now that's cool as a consumer, but how does that affect the creation of products? That we don't know. And I think that that's interesting because, and people have been bringing this up in terms of the strike, is that Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and stuff, they don't share their numbers. And people make the argument that a lot of this stuff isn't watched by many people at all. And that the money is all kind of like in and out of these various tunnels and that it doesn't all add up. And so, I just want to reiterate that I totally agree in the value proposition, but just mid and long-term funding and what the data out of Game Pass is telling developers versus what the data out of a la carte sales are telling developers is interesting. Because I was even looking and comparing games and like game for game that would be available only a la carte on the different platforms. And so I looked at Dead Space and Dead Island 2 and stuff, and like, lo and behold, like 3-4% higher completion ratings for those games on PlayStation than Xbox. So it's actually seeping in even to the mentality of those that buy the games there as well. The numbers are the numbers. It's not like incredible, but you could see that becoming exponential and growing over time. And that's why I just think that something like this deserves a lot of scrutiny, because I think that that inflection point will affect things in a really meaningful way. And when you look at arts and entertainment, I think we're like 1 for 2 in surviving tumultuous industry defining moments. So there's risk. And that's my concern. All right. We can go around with these next ones. We can answer the next two because I know COG's got to go in 20 minutes or so. 4 and 5 are the best case scenario for Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard is, and the worst case scenario is. So 4 and 5, let's answer them together. I mean, you don't have to answer them one after the other, but take them at the same time, as it were. Chris, let's go to you first. I want to start with you this time. The best case scenario for Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard is, and the worst case scenario.
Man, I mean, the best case is that we see a lot of... I feel like the best case scenario is that we see a lot of IP that would have never gotten a shot, revived in some way. That's pie in the sky. That's wishful thinking, obviously. But obviously, to feed the content machine that a subscription service demands, to feed a service like Game Pass, you need games, and it kind of behooves you to reach into the back pocket and pick at stuff that, you know, at least already has some eyes on it or would draw some attention. Your Crashes, your Spyros, things like that. That'd be awesome. Like that'd be a win for, I think, most people, especially because, you know, these are games that would have otherwise just kind of continued to exist in some kind of in memoriam status, which is a shame because Crash 4 was awesome. I still maintain that it's a sad shame that studio got sucked into that wormhole immediately after putting out like a really fantastic 3D platformer. And the worst case scenario, I feel like might be potentially the domino effect of arbitrary exclusivity, because it's kind of it's already convoluted in some way, like the way that this Activision deal is shaking up. It's convoluted in some way in the way Bethesda is doing it as well, and in the sense that like Starfield's exclusive, but then these things won't be, and you know, Call of Duty won't be, but like maybe this will be. It's like it feels kind of all over the place, and that unpredictability is unfortunate, but it's unfortunate in the context of a greater trend of consolidation within the industry, because I think everybody in this room knows that Sony's probably not. Sony doesn't have the incentive to play as nice with any of that. You know, if they go and buy something, no way in hell is that going to be on Xbox in any way. It might not even be on PC, depending on what it is. Like that's an even bigger concern.
Well, why
too,
wouldn't they treat some of their acquisitions depending like Bungie?
Well, that's kind of the thing. It's like Bungie is a potential trend, but it's not the rule, right? Right now, it's kind of the exception. Like, because every other studio that they've bought does not, like, they're unique within the PlayStation first party as of right now. In the future, that could change. Future acquisitions could be like on par with Bungie, but as of right now, it kind of seems like an exception that they made on the behalf of live service to bolster their live service. So we don't know really. Though that would be smart, and I think they do have like some kind of. They do have, I assume, some kind of understanding that, hey, we probably can't necessarily be as exclusive as we probably want to be. But at the same time, you know, one example doesn't show a trend necessarily.
Well, Sony might think that the war, you know, the field of battle has changed, you know. So
maybe, but I think Bungie was just one that they knew. I feel like on some level they knew they couldn't get away with it, because Destiny is such a big platform as far as like multi-platform, you know, enterprises go. Like it's huge on PC. It's I don't know how big it is on Xbox, but it's pretty, you know, I know I have a lot of people on my friends list who play Destiny 2 on Xbox, and it's you know,
still in the top 10 most.
So yeah. I feel like they were in kind of a Minecraft scenario where even back when Microsoft was, you know, reigning in Minecraft, they were in that territory of like they could make it exclusive. I just think they knew they couldn't get away with it because the optics of it would be so catastrophic. And I feel like Sony might have been in a similar situation, but we don't know. We didn't unfortunately get a lot of insider knowledge on like that decision from this whole thing. So it's still kind of up in the air as to whether or not that will continue in that same way. But I mean, that would be my concern is just the general kind of the increasingly restricted availability of certain games and IP that prior to this mass consolidation wouldn't have been so restricted. And that would be my two.
Fair enough. Dustin, I'm gonna go to Cog this time just to give him time to answer, because he's gonna have to go soon, and then we'll go to you next. I'm breaking the chain. I'm sorry, but want to accommodate Cog here.
Sorry,
and then Cog, we're not going to do question 6 because it's redundant. But 7 and 8, you can just text me when you're driving or in the Uber or whatever.
I'll get some bars off of that. I wanted to talk about 6.
Yeah, let's answer number 4 and 5. Best case and worst case scenario now that this acquisition is presumably going to go through.
Both of us kind of what Chris alluded to earlier, which is management related. So for me, the best case scenario, I look at, you know, when you have an acquisition of this size, there's going to be so much structural change, right? So to me, it would make things easier, in my opinion. Again, provided people don't take a bag and get bought out. We know Bobby's going to take his parachute. We get that. But to me, Ferguson and Ibarra are key, because Ibarra was a former lifelong Xbox guy, you know, and, you know, definitely a hardcore gamer, definitely, you know, Blizzard and Diablo. Those are his babies, so to speak. He knows how things are run over there. So ideally, if they could retain him, right, during this transition period of acquisition, to me, that brings a lot of stability. Rob Ferguson, I think, is extremely key. So even if Ibarra leaves, Ferguson is the finisher. From the Xbox 360 game, this guy, we had Cliffy B on ILP. He could not sing enough praises about Rob Ferguson during the Epic era and during the 360 era. for the delivery of games in a timely fashion and with quality control. That is going to be critical for them. You know, especially when all the pieces merge together, and even if it's hands off on some things, they're going to have that community. Again, former Xbox guys from that system that to me would synergize well because they've both been on both sides of the fence. So I got that. The other thing is we alluded to earlier, what you alluded to earlier, Colin, which is on the positive side, is the numbers making sense, right? They have to get to this internal target. And best case scenario, let's just say, again, I'm throwing out a mythical number, 100 million is when the math starts mathing, right? When you have this amount of subscribers and you get this amount of revenue in Game Pass Ultimate or Core, or whatever it is, and they're going to get that boost from Core like we talked about, right? Now you force that Xbox Live Gold guy to be, he's Game Pass now, right? And now, guess what? It's like a drug dealer. Oh, you like that? You like those little 4 or 5 games you gave me? Oh, you like that? Okay, so guess what else we got over here for you, right? And gamers could talk all they want. When they see Starfield on their Game Pass Core and you ain't got it, and your whole zeitgeist is playing it, you gonna update for that $1, $2. So we gonna give you this little
start doing crack?
Oh yeah. This is a drug deal. This is a drug deal. This is the hustle. I know what they doing. They ain't slick. Colin saw right through it. I knew what they was doing. So that's my first thing on the good side. On the bad side, is again, shout out to man Chris, is this is a lot to overtake, right? There's a lot of moving parts with King, Activision. The thing that I see no one talking about, pipeline as far as all the different Call of Duty new access points. You've got to get this game on more places. There are way more places this thing is going. It was before PlayStation, PC, Xbox. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to get this figure out a way to get it Nintendo Switch. You're going to have to get it on all NVIDIA's cloud service, all these European cloud services. You're going to have to figure that out. That is not easy. It's not like Holly said earlier, like it's not just put it on a platform and flip a switch, done. You know what I'm saying? There's work involved. And then we're talking about a multiplayer game with a lot of issues and, lag and, we see with Halo Infinite, just desyncing on PC. That is a lot for the structure of a game. So that's it. And the last thing that the hardcore gamers might not like, that I'm warning them now, get ready for the mobile. Me and Maddie talked about this. The mobile, hey, here's his Marvel Snap and his Candy Crush 5 in the showcase. Hardcore gamers might not like it, but they're going to gravitate.
That would be so catastrophic.
Listen,
they always have that stretch in all their showcases, man.
I mean, they pushing it. I'm bracing myself because if these things are making money, you've got to promote. And they might be that Game Pass Gears Pop section of the showcase that we got to get ready for. I was at the Keighley's. I saw Marvel Snap on stage. I was like, wow, look where we have come. So anyway, those are my two shortly. Man. And I did want to get on it because if I could just throw that bonus, I know I'm ahead.
No, yeah. If you want to answer numbers 7 and 8, we're going to skip 6 just because we already kind of touched on it. But
the only reason why I want to go on 6.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. Do 6, and I would like to hear your answers for 7 and 8. So 6 is consolidation in the video game industry blank.
Yes. All right. So Kyle, this is my thing. And I love y'all. I love my sacred boys. But I got to call y'all to the front of the congregation real quick. Look, I get it. Valid concerns, Dustin. Valid concerns, Colin. No one's saying what you guys are saying is wrong as far as the long-term health of the industry. These are legit concerns. I don't want to minimize that, poo-poo that. For me, the reason why I still think it's a little bit of fear-mongering, this is the circle of life, y'all. This is how, like, it's literally like kind of what Maddie alluded to, where it's like mergers and acquisitions in this space has been going on for so long. It's literally the next one comes in to take its place. We may not like it, but I mean, just on a pure base level, right? You got Tencent, who is literally the largest corporation in gaming, still acquiring. We got Embracer out there. Sony pre and post ABK have been acquiring studios. Now, granted, they're not to the scope of this. I get it. Scope and scale, that definitely means a lot. What Dustin is saying is true. The scale for ABK is crazy. But we can't say that consolidation is not already happening in front of our eyes, right? So you have that aspect. And then to me, it's funny because, Maddie, you can laugh, but it's like, look at the name, like it opened our eyes, like Square Enix. right? Sega Sammy, Activision Blizzard, right? They Bandai Namco. We're here. Like, to me, it's like we are already here. So it's like there's always going to be that shift. And I get it. It behooves Microsoft to, to have there's huge risk with that. There's no one saying that it's not. But to me, mergers and acquisitions, this has been going on for the longest time. And to me, my comeback to it is always, what is the alternative? Because I'm from the era of the Acclaims, the Midways, the THQs, the original THQs.
Yeah.
They were out of here. This is a
good times, man.
bro. They're out of here. Like that. The video game business is so volatile. It's so risky, and it's like, to me, I rather the things I love not go away and have a chance to live to fight another day under someone else's banner. You've been conquered. Come over here. Now you're here. But to me, it's the better alternative than being wiped out. Or, like Colin, me and you on the same page with this one. I can't have Tencent out here with my Mass Effect and there's no, you know what I mean? Like, a game like Mass Effect can't even exist.
That's why I hope, dude. I really just hope, with like beating the drum as much as I do about external, like kind of malign countries and companies, that I hopefully am contributing something to what will be the furor that will erupt if and when those things happen. Like, that's my only hope. That's like my only defensive measure. Go on.
Absolutely. And I think what you're saying is valid. That, the last thing, as far as, that is concerned, and Maddie made a good point with, we're seeing the cycle of life again with people cashing out, creating their own studios, that kind of thing. So that was my point on that. And then the last one, you said 7 was the
7 and 8 were the next company Microsoft should buy, the next company Sony should buy is, and we'll let you answer these early. We'll get back to the other ones. Cool. Matt, you have
Thank
you.
Are
you or do you need to go soon too?
I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay,
don't worry about me.
Okay, good.
I'm just getting food in my system. I'm good.
I love
I'm
how
good.
you're good. I'm sorry.
It's all good. All right,
Take it down.
let's get your answers to these questions
7.
as well. Yeah.
Okay, 7. Come on, I'm biased. Look, I'm a Sega kid. I'm an orphan. I'm an orphan.
Did you see the video that was going around of the CCO of Sega?
He said no.
No, but people are saying what he said, but I heard something different. He was saying no, not right now. No, not right now.
Ooh,
Yeah, he had a little Visa Gilmon energy.
Oh, a little Visa
yeah, a little. Not right now. Later.
So I thought that was interesting. I actually thought that kind of didn't squash anything, that they're leaving. If you really didn't want to be bought, you'd say like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
not right now.
Even I heard dudes say no before, and then we heard Pete Parsons, right, Chris? Like,
yeah, right.
No, and then you over there, you got to say
never again, except for twice.
Sorry,
I was just saying, I will say this in defense of Microsoft's potential acquisition of Sega, is that to me seems to be the only naturalistic Japanese.
Say the word.
Yeah,
Come
like,
on, just get
organic.
I need the word. Say my man.
It's not literally organic. People make fun of me using that term, but that's an economic term of art. I don't mean, so I'm not saying that this isn't literally organic, but we can use that term here as if you want. But that, like, people talking about, like, when Microsoft was talking to Square Enix, I'm like, why don't you get the fuck out of here? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, you have no
crazy.
business sniffing around this company. That's totally ridiculous. But Sega has been with Microsoft from the very beginning with Xbox. And when Sega ship sunk with the Saturn and Dreamcast, their games went to Xbox first and foremost.
Bro.
And I think that to me is, I don't want any further consolidation. Some people are just inherently offended by that because it doesn't seem to make any sense. And I'm like, no, that makes probably the most sense. To me, though, I think any Japanese company would risk a lot selling to an American company or a Western company, because I think that they have to keep an eye on their primary market, and the access to their primary market, they just simply don't play Xbox in Japan. And I think that some people think that doesn't matter, but I really think it does. And I think that was one of the reasons why Kame left Tango as soon as he could, because like, you want your people to play your games,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting in the documents that we saw that, based on Phil's letter to Amy Hood for the interest in Sega, what was very key to me was that the games would be multi-plat. Nothing was going to change. Right. It was just going to be exclusive to the streaming service, to Game Pass. Yeah. But they were still going to be on PlayStation. They're still going to be other play. And I felt that makes sense, to Colin's point, because you can't pull it from that region. You can't. You just can't. It doesn't make sense. So I'm there to, obviously the long and short of the story, I'm a Sega orphan. I loved all the Sega systems. PlayStation came and was the whirlwind that it was, and my beloved Sega was gone. Xbox looked like a natural home, brother. I didn't have a home console. I was an
I
orphan.
understand that. The Sega
it's
Xbox
familiar.
connection is totally that's
this-
natural to me. Yeah.
This picture you're painting of like young Cog shivering under a cardboard box in the rain outside of a burning Sega office.
Bro, that sad and killed me. And then Gcast was hot, but it just didn't last, man. So yeah, so pretty much, and then obviously the Peter Moore sensibilities. He came there, did change things. They were very aggressive. Look, to Maddie's point, we've always talked about, and I got laughed at the time, about the partnership with Sega was just cloud only, but we're seeing that it's more fruitful than that, and we're seeing, like I said, the Yakuza series, all the legacy IP, Super Game. We hear all that stuff. So to me, natural fit makes sense. And then as far as Sony, my last point. Yeah, it's probably Square. It's probably Square. To me, I still think Final Fantasy VII was so influential being on the PlayStation platform. I remember it like it was yesterday. And to me, I remember the influence of getting grown people who had no idea what a JRPG was because of that game. And to me, that relationship has always been natural, as far as I'm concerned. Now, to Colin's point, and it's probably like, do you need to buy the cow when you're already getting the milk? But to Dustin's point, I think you got to be in defensive mode. You got to kind of protect just in case Microsoft's looking at your girl. like that's where we at now. So I know Colin hates it, but it makes sense. Ultimately, honestly though, if it didn't happen, I still think Sony's fine. I think they will be aggressive. They continue to put out the quality games that we know them for. And that's pretty much where I'm at with it. But those would be about two gets for the acquisitions of who should get.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Now, Dustin, you want to stop recording here and then we'll let Cog go. All right.
Cool,
So
we'll let him upload.
All right. Yeah. So Cog, we bid you adieu. I'm sorry that we went too long to be able to accommodate you fully on this podcast, but we appreciated your presence.
This is excellent. Thank you for letting me get those dogs. I really enjoyed this. This is
all good, my friend. Okay, we're back. We had to say goodbye to Cog. He has an appointment to attend. And then we had some technical issues, as we always do. But we returned. Now, where were we on this? We jumped way ahead to accommodate Cog's schedule.
You skipped me.
Yeah, I skipped you. So with what question was that? It was number
question.
We were on 4 and 5.
Case scenarios,
I think
right.
Yeah.
I didn't go. Dustin didn't go.
Okay, cool. So it would be Dustin next, right? Because that was okay, right. So Dustin, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario for Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Take them as you will.
Yeah, I actually wrote down answers for these that I'd like to just read aloud, and then I can elaborate more potentially. So for the best case scenario, I wrote, Microsoft uses the might of its resources to focus on its vast array of IP and chills out on buying stuff until their management is rock solid at the very least. And then on the flip side, Sony feels threatened and stops being a low-key dick, nickel and diming people for stupid stuff, focuses on great high-quality content as they have to compete, and figures out how to market and manage live service stuff. So that's like I said, that's the best case scenario. Microsoft, that's the big thing, as I mentioned earlier, is the management and the stewardship of the IP. They got enough resources. I just hope I understand the Game Pass machine, feed the machine with more and more content, but you don't want to end up like Embracer at the same time. So just chill out for a little bit, get these under your belt, learn how to manage this huge amount of studios, and then maybe thinking about expanding a little bit more. Maybe if you have to, right? Then for the worst case scenario, I wrote Microsoft continues to buy stuff and continues their streak of poor management. IPs and studios go down the shitter. Sony copies and starts buying huge publishers and bows to the market trend of streaming services. And this is we're talking worst case scenario. What Colin was talking about as far as streaming services does come to pass. And I think that the most scary thing in the worst case scenario is the death of studios in general. I think you look at Embracer Group as a big one and how they're like, well, we're just going to have to start selling some of the stuff and maybe even potentially shutting stuff down that they just can't handle anymore. And obviously it's a very different scenario with the might of Microsoft behind some of this stuff, but Microsoft, just like Sony, just like anyone else, they're not immune to shutting things down. So that would be the absolute worst case scenario, is that it just becomes too unwieldy. And flip side too with Sony is that they start to buy a bunch of stuff too, and it becomes too hard for them to manage as well. It's totally in the realm of possibility. So those are my two flip sides, good and bad.
Maddie, we'll go to you now. Best case and worst case scenarios for the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard.
I think I have less to say on best case because I think all of us at some point or another have treaded the ground, but I think the only added wrinkle I have is the best case scenario would be the mobile stays the sideshow that fuels new IP and reactivating old ones. I do worry about a little bit of what Cog touched on, where, Xbox has made it so painfully obvious. They're not hiding it at all. Like, they want to be big in the mobile space. They think a lot of the console growth has flattened. They definitely believe what they said about, we lost the worst generation to lose, and therefore there's no fighting back. So they're trying to find all these different ways to crawl back in. And I just hope that mobile, is that thing that generates them a lot of revenue. We can see that on their earnings reports, and that it just continues to fuel these projects like a Pentiment, that you can let something like that go through because Candy Crush is doing its thing. But I hope it doesn't lead to something like Candy Crush being on the stage or like a tie-in, like, oh, look, we got Halo and Candy Crush for this promotion for the new expansion, or something awful like that, right? So,
I never thought a sentence could hurt me so deeply as you just.
Sorry, I don't want to hurt you, but I worry about that type of stuff because I definitely think Sega becomes an attractive target for them, even more so because they bought the Angry Birds developers. So Microsoft is able to succeed in that. You own Candy Crush and Angry Birds, and then they'll have a fucking field day with that. So I just hope that if we're looking at Xbox, that the mobile stuff stays the sideshow. We understand it's an almost necessary evil. I get it generates a lot of money, and that it can fuel the console market, because I don't think Xbox should so readily move on from that. Like, they're really focusing on, of course, mobile growth, but PC growth. And I just feel like if you want Game Pass to grow, you got to feed that as much as you want to feed your mobile market. Like, you need to give it new, exciting stuff. You can't really slouch on that, because we see how like Netflix dipped tremendously when they started to really slouch on that. And it felt like, it was way too occasional for people to get something good where they wouldn't keep their subscription service. Now, for the worst case scenario, it's definitely, to me, that nothing is implemented from the lessons learned throughout their acquisition of Bethesda. I think they should have been better prepared regardless of that. But things like Redfall, the slow pipeline of communication building between the two teams, it's fucking inexcusable. And I hope that they go, okay, we fucked up, or we just hope people didn't care enough, and now we know they care enough, where we got to be on top of this stuff. Where when you bring Activision in, kind of, I think it was Dustin or Chris, one of you two said, like, we got to know, like, if an Activision game's bad, it's not their bad game anymore. It's ours. So we got to be on top of that stuff. We cannot have that. We should have been there more for that. Not that every game has to be a 9 out of 10. I'd love that, but I know there will definitely be misses. But you can't have something like a Redfall happen again as a first party studio, as a platform holder, I should say, with a ton of first party talent and a ton of resources. You have no excuse to be putting a game out that just at the very minimum works. Like, Redfall barely worked. So that stuff is inexcusable. And that's where it gets into that managerial nightmare, right? Where it's going to be a tall task for them. And I don't know. I think that's why they're buying publishers, so they can kind of let them just continue to run themselves. We know Bethesda, they don't operate independently, so to say, but they run themselves effectively, and Xbox just kind of checks in. And I imagine Activision will be much of the same, but I think that you don't need to go back to the Microsoft that was always on top of people. But I think you do. You own these companies, you own these properties. You got to breathe down their necks a little bit. That doesn't mean you make creative choices for them, but you have to ensure that what happened with Bethesda, even communication woes. We saw the Pete Hines email during the FTC case where he's like, why are they saying all this stuff is going to be free to everyone, available to everybody? Why are our games exclusive? And I think he more so is just trying to protect Todd Howard for if he was pressed on these questions. But stuff like that's important that we don't get to see. We're focused on the games and the communication about the games. But that pipeline between these studios needs to be just airtight. Like they need to be talking and on the phone every day. That should just be someone's job, as far as I'm concerned. Just putting in the calls, just seeing what's going on, making the trips. Because if they don't learn anything from what went wrong with Bethesda, this will, as Colin said, you can't take an L on this, and that would be the easiest way to take an L. And last point is Xbox is probably going to be by their fan base granted this buffer, because there might be stuff coming out from Activision within the next year that, just like with Bethesda, that we can't claim that. They got in really late. We can't claim that. And so they have to make sure that what's 2-3 years down the line and so on is the stuff they're really on top of. Because Redfall is one that, again, they slouched on. It was 2-3 years out when they got Bethesda. And we saw what happened when they weren't involved in that. That game probably should have been canned. I'm sure Arcane Austin probably wouldn't have minded that, because they lost most of their talent that made the game Prey over this. So I'm sure they wouldn't have cared. So that would be, to me, best and worst case scenario.
That's really the irony of that whole situation, right? Is that because that's like a situation that most developers under acquisition would dread. Yeah. The idea that like this third party would just kind of come in and be like, "No, you can't do that anymore," and they were hoping for it. Like they've really got to find some middle ground. I don't think breathing down people's necks is the answer. I don't think being as hands off as they've been is the answer. But like they've got to find some way to get results without stifling the culture of the studios that they acquire. And that's probably like a really difficult dance to do managerially.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be easy, of course. It's just something that they cannot compromise on. If you fuck that up, then everyone's going to be, even your biggest fans are going to start being against any company you buy, because you're just fucking it all up. And that's where you do make the industry worse. And I just think they need to be wary of that stuff. It's good to inject Game Pass with content, but I remember I was one of the first people who, like, when they did the trio of, like, I think it was Outriders, Dark Alliance, and there was one other game that comes to mind. And when they started that day one Game Pass stuff, like, those games are bad, and people were like, "Oh, but we're getting them for free," and trying to change how we critique games. I'm like, they're still bad video games. Not Outriders. I love Outriders, but I'm saying, like, Outriders was a rough launch. And so I just don't think we want to go back to that early 2001 area with Game Pass where, we're getting stuff. We're getting Back for Blood and Anacrusis. And it's like, I mean, we're in much of a better spot now. So I think they just need to really stay on top of that. And I agree, Chris, find that middle ground where, you're not right down their neck, but, you own them. So be a responsible parent, will you?
Yeah.
For me, I'll answer these quickly here. I know we're going along, but number 4, the best case scenario for Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. So I'll answer this from my perspective is Game Pass doesn't effectively change core industry economics. I don't really care how well Game Pass does, as long as it doesn't subsume the ability for new AAA games to be made for a profit for the companies that go into making quality products with fairly treated, workforces. And I think, Maddie, and we've talked about this, I think too, on Chris and Dustin on Sacred, is I really think that the industry is really uniquely vulnerable to issues of labor strife. Not that people have gotten super organized yet, but they're beginning to, and I think that that's good. I mean, these guys should be fighting for their value, and I think that's like, why would you ever root for the company over the worker? It doesn't really make a lot of sense unless they're being really unreasonable, and they're not. And I think that with things like subscription services, residuals actually come more and more into play because of the way things are sold through that model. And we don't even have an organized labor situation that in the United States for the games industry that works on any level like it does in movies, TV, animation, other places where. So I think that Game Pass can effectively change core industry economics in a very deleterious way at a time when games are becoming so expensive to make, and at a time when games I still think are severely undervalued for what they are. And that's a problem. And so my earnest hope is that this really has a status quo effect. I don't wish Microsoft ill at all. I hope they have great success with it I just don't want that residual radiation coming into the spaces that we care about, which is exactly what happened with the fucking iPhone. And then my other answer is the worst case scenario for Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard is this truly does cause a run on company acquisitions, because we think that's going to happen. That seems logical, but I guess there's still a way for it to not happen. The only thing that I look at is maybe making, I don't think there's any counter argument that people are going to continue to consolidate, but I've made this point before that we're at a really bad time for this, in a sense that you have to be dealing with cash buyers. So if you're looking at it from Sony's point of view, when people say Sony can't afford X, Y, and Z, it's like Sony can afford whatever they want to the tune of what they can borrow and leverage against what they own and what they control. And if they wanted to take two in, say, a really, really vibrant 2% interest rate economy where the money is basically free, and they go and they raise it or they borrow it or they spin things off to sell to buy a bigger company, I think that that's much more difficult to do when interest rates are 6%, 7%, and only going up. And I know that that's a very boring point, but it's just super important. So see, in the housing market, situations like this often benefit cash buyers too, because they just get to circumvent the entire system and just drop cash from a parachute, in. And that's what Microsoft did for Activision. And we were saying earlier that Activision's profit doesn't really suggest that they're worth what they were paid for. Although you could argue, and maybe the danger in this deal not happening ultimately is that they can argue that they're worth even more since the deal has taken so long. But yeah, so I just wanted to say that my hope is that the industry economics remain vibrant for multiple paths, especially because, and I want to underline this, I think subscription services are incredibly valuable for legacy content. Like, in some way, Game Pass if Game Pass literally had a 1 year new games rule, it would almost be like the perfect thing with no downside, because games don't make money that deep into their lives. And so Game Pass was this brilliant Microsoft-like service revelation that said, like, oh, we have a little boost for you at the end, like a little bit of a license money, a little bit of this, a little bit of income on a game that's just sitting on a digital storefront, not selling copies. Those things can, I think, live in harmony with each other. And that's why I continue to say that Nintendo's online subscription is the most valuable one. Like, I was so surprised when people had a problem with it, because I was like, this is awesome. When I was on,
because Virtual Console was too good. Like, that's the thing. It was just so good that you start doing backwards compatibility via subscription service, and it's like, it is good, right? If you look at it in like a silo, but I just think, like, comparatively speaking, it was just like night and day.
And I've said, and people know, like, I don't give a shit about PS Plus. Like, I just don't care. I literally have it specifically for cloud saves. So I would, if they made that free, I think I would just cancel PS Plus. I don't think I would even have it. Although I like my little icon. Get my little icon. Okay. Let's see. That answers those. So I said that we could skip number 6, but Cog wanted to answer it. Do you guys want to answer this question? Any of you? I'm happy to skip it because I feel like we've gone into it, but you might have a specific answer.
I don't really have anything that I would say uniquely to that question that hasn't already been kind of.
Yeah.
In
hindsight, it's a redundant question. So the number 6 for people that are curious was consolidation in the video game industry, blank. But 7 and 8, we can go around the horn. And Dustin, let's start with you on this one. The next company Microsoft should buy is blank. The next company Sony should buy is blank. So assuming that they will acquire new studios and publications, I want you to pontificate on what you think they should buy and why, with the assumption that we know that you would prefer to be no M&A.
That was good. The distinction I was going to make is that I really feel like the answer is nobody. But let's say we're playing into the hypothetical situation that we are an executive. If I were them, I think the most important thing, and I don't know if it's through purchasing or deals or whatever, is that they got to continue to get that foothold into Japan and figure out how to make Japanese games have Xbox be a destination for those. And we see them doing that right now with Sega. But something I've reiterated many times on Sacred Symbols is just how much both anime and Japanese games, JRPGs, just continue to become bigger and bigger and bigger in our gaming nerd culture, whatever you want to say. And I think that's going to be essential for them moving forward, that maybe not even just having these games on Game Pass, but again, this is executive hat Dustin, but if Sony is going in and buying exclusivity deals on Japanese games, then they should probably do it too. Figure out a way, make it happen. Maybe the next Tales game or something is Xbox exclusive for a year or something like that. That would be, I think, potentially a sound investment. And then the next company that Sony should buy, this is such a boring answer, but I think Square Enix really does make the most sense just because they already have such a big working relationship with them already. We're doing these, we're coupling these, right? I'm not jumping ahead. Okay.
We're
I was trying to make sure. I think Square Enix makes a lot of sense. I think it makes more sense than Capcom in particular. Capcom I think would be great, but we've already seen Square Enix kind of reduce their output on Xbox, where Capcom is still releasing a lot of stuff over there. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of people bring up Sony buying From Software. I just don't understand what the hoops they would have to go through to make that work, with them already being owned by Kadokawa and them already owning part of Kadokawa. So, and how that would work too with a lot of their most value IP being owned by Bandai Namco. So I'll go with Square.
All right. That brings us to Maddie, I believe, in the sequence.
Yes,
We're in a new. I'm confused for people that don't, because we're using Zencaster and now the order is different for me.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't matter.
So Microsoft should buy the next company. Microsoft should buy the next company. Sony should buy.
So I'm thinking for Xbox, I'll have to piggyback on COG. We've definitely been two peas in a pod on this one. That I think Xbox should go get Sega. I do think that's one that's kind of, in a way, like Bethesda, been in the cards for a while. And that feeling only got stronger with Rovio, because I just feel Xbox is really gung-ho on this mobile initiative. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Candy Crush, Angry Birds, you take all of your little IP and pepper them in somehow. I think they just win there big time. But also, like Dustin said, I just think that Japanese footprint's missing. And it's funny because the playbook's there. Like they were very successful. When you look at some of the best-selling Japanese games, because I think Famitsu had like stats for it. It was during the Xbox era and the Xbox 360 era. Particularly, I think Dead or Alive 3 was the original Xbox game that sold extremely well for Xbox in Japan. But otherwise, they were all 360. And they were ones like Tales of Vesperia, Dustin mentioned Tales of, and a number of others. Interestingly, I don't think Blue Dragon or Lost Odyssey made that list, which is insane to me. Because like Lost Odyssey is literally Final Fantasy for Xbox. Like it's incredible, like how good it is. So I just think there's been a demand for that Japanese content. You're seeing Xbox pretty much notice that, okay, Square Enix has Final Fantasy in the bag. And I've said for a while, you got to go for the next biggest thing, the kind of up-and-comer, which I think is Persona. Will it ever be as big as Final Fantasy, as relevant as Final Fantasy? Maybe. I mean, there's certainly a lot of love among core gamers, but it's going to take a while to get there. But I think Persona is the wise move to, like, when the new trailer hits, you see the Xbox branding. Like, I think Xbox is wise to just throw bags of money at that and create that association. And Sega has Atlas. Sega has a lot of stuff that's worked really well for Xbox when it comes to Game Pass. Yakuza boomed because of Game Pass. Not that it wasn't great before. Football Manager, that's one of Sega's most lucrative games. They said they love Game Pass. They got more players in than ever before. Even weird things like 2 Point Hospital, 2 Point Campus, love Game Pass. So to me, it's just written. It's a matter of when, as far as I'm concerned with these two. But, and this will kind of get into my next answer, there is the reality that Xbox can have close partnerships without having to buy people, because they're going to get what they want anyway. So what I mean by that is, for Sony, who should they buy? I would actually say, I'll give a fun answer, but my actual answer would probably be nobody, because I technically don't think they need it. I really don't think they do. I think they're doing the best they've ever done with what they have. I think their way they do business would still work, but I get why they'd want to start protecting some assets. I actually don't think they go and get Square Enix because of that, because I think we have Square Enix pretty much. Like, they are giving us their stuff. We're paying for it. Their stuff does well on our platforms. It just seems like the relationships are really strong there from the outside looking in. I would say Capcom. I'd say go get the more prolific one that's on an absolute tear right now. And I mean, I know the reviews aren't glowing, but I would even say Exoprimal wasn't a miss. they're single-handedly responsible for literally pulling survival horror out of the fucking grave when people were blaming Let's Play YouTubers for why that genre is dead, and making it so big that you get things like Dead Space remake, Silent Hill 2 remake. We'll see what happens. So I just feel like, go get Capcom. They're making everything in that, whatever the tech that's in RE Engine is insane. It's powering everything they're doing, and it all feels like custom made for their respective games. Like you have a survival horror game and a Monster Hunter game working on the same engine in ways that feel supernatural. I mean, it's just super impressive. So I'd go get Capcom for tech. I get them for IP, Japanese association, stuff that you're not getting exclusively. I just feel like that's the winning combo there. Because Square is COG would put it, a mercenary, right? I think they're just going to go where the money is, but I think PlayStation's willing to pay them. So, why pay for what you're already getting? I say that more so because from what I double checked, I could be wrong on this. I don't believe Xbox had like a Sobo on their list, who's Microsoft Flight Simulator and
yeah, which is strange because that's one of the very few teams that I think would actually make a lot of sense for them. Right,
exactly, and a Plague Tale. So you kind of get your Last of Us competitor, and you get your Microsoft Flight Sim, which is decently popular for them. And it's like they, out of all companies, like that was one I always said, oh yeah, it's definitely gonna happen. When I didn't see that, I'm thinking, okay, like they clearly feel comfortable that they're not going anywhere. We're going to keep this partnership. Why do we need to go spend X $1 billion on them? So that's why I don't think PlayStation is going to end up buying Square Enix, because I don't, unless they feel truly threatened that with the deteriorating before our very eyes relationship between Xbox and Square Enix, that they're going to come in and be like, oh, we're going to fucking buy you anyway. If something like that somehow happened, I guess maybe you want to protect them, but I think they should feel pretty comfortable with that relationship. Just because it seems like things have been a bit of a falling out between Square Enix and Xbox. I've said it before, I know Xbox was like vocally to Square Enix displeased that they didn't bring Octopath Traveler to Xbox. Like I know there were like people in the building at higher up positions very displeased by the decision making there, and they didn't even know. So it's one of those things where, yeah, I don't know if PlayStation needs to go out and protect that purchase personally, but someone like Capcom, who can shift stuff in your favor heavily if you have that stuff exclusively on your platform, you might want to protect that. Resident Evil 4 remake, not to be trifled with. So those would be the two targets for me. The obvious one, Sega, and I'd say, if anything, Capcom for PlayStation.
Yeah, those are interesting choices. I think the Sega choices really resonates with me for Microsoft, like I said, just because I think it makes sense. The only other Japanese company I think would have made sense for them of scale would have been pre-merger Tecmo, just because that was another company that was in with Xbox from the very beginning. And so with like Ninja Gaiden was an exclusive, the revival of Ninja Gaiden, people might forget, was Xbox exclusive.
Yeah.
And times. So, and it's interesting how times change, but that company also has deep roots with and had a little bit of both of those companies had kind of mercenary roots during the Xbox era because they had really no choice. They were getting bodied a little bit. Chris, let's go to you for number 7 and number 8. The next company Microsoft should buy is, and the next company Sony should buy is.
Sure. So I mean, I feel I'm for sale. Like if Microsoft wants to throw some money at me, I think that's fine. But I think honestly, like I feel like Sega is like the most obvious one, but just to keep things a little bit more fun and just to keep it broad, given that they're looking into mobile so heavily, and that's such a key decision for them to go after Activision Blizzard specifically. My mind says, like, why stop there, or why necessarily stay even in the realm of console? Like, why not look at Roblox or something? Because Roblox is stupid huge. Like Roblox, and by the way, this is with the caveat that we want none of this to happen. Yeah. I want to repeat that again. But like, if you're looking at just a sheer force of nature, Roblox is another one of those games that, like, I think COG was mentioning earlier, where it's like nobody seems to care about it, but it is phenomenally huge, like to a degree that is almost just inconceivable. It's so big and so popular with such a specific demographic that, and it's a complete blind spot for me. Like I have no knowledge of Roblox at all, but I'm pretty sure there's is it battle 8-bit or something. What's that?
Is that a Roblox game? Don't tell me it's a Roblox game.
I have no idea, but like
I've been playing that game. Don't tell me that.
I mean, dude, I wouldn't be surprised. Like it's one of these areas where like there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of sheer force there, and it seems like it's something that they could acquire that would be outside of the industry that could give them a decent amount of like, I don't want to say clout because it's like a really dumb term.
It was made in Roblox. Holy crap.
It looked like a game that was made in Roblox. That's why I mentioned
I think I saw
like
a 9/11 recreation in Roblox. I think that's
Roblox is what Dreams, I think, wishes it was. You know what I mean? So like, I look at that and I see this big force of nature that also, it's like a have your cake and eat it too situation. Like Roblox is an acquisition that wouldn't upset anybody in the hardcore space at all because no one cares. And they could keep it exactly the same. It could give them a ton of money, a ton of revenue, a ton of profit, and shake the industry very, very lightly. It's kind of like best case scenario as far as like, and I say that only because Sega, the obvious answer is off the table. And as for Sony, obviously Square's the obvious one, but I think, dude, like if you're looking at your competitor that just acquired Activision Blizzard, they just acquired, first party rights to Call of Duty. That's a big system, or not a big system seller, but a big seller on your platform. I'm looking at ways to kind of compete with that in some way, and so I'm looking at Take-Two. I'm looking at GTA 6 or whatever that's going to be, which is undoubtedly going to be a massive, massive game. If Rockstar's trajectory is to be bet on, and that it obviously it's no Call of Duty, it can't be nearly as annualized, but that's Grand Theft Auto 5 makes a ton of money, and I think they would be more than happy to take some of that, especially in a situation where like, hey, if Microsoft gets to make money off of our Call of Duty sales, let's make money off of Grand Theft Auto. I feel like that's not exactly a tit for tat, but at least somewhat comparable as far as like scale goes. Like the sheer success of Grand Theft Auto versus the sheer success of Call of Duty, granted in different forms and different piecemeal offerings, is the closest you're going to get, really. So those are my answers.
Yeah, Take-Two would be interesting. That's kind of the company I was thinking of when I was talking earlier about like liquidity of money and like being able to borrow, because if you buy Take-Two at their market cap, they're a very big company. Their market cap is higher than Sony's entire yearly revenue.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that would be impossible. That would actually be, I think, more possible than people think if they could just leverage. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Oh, my friend.
He's a little skittish. He gets scared. Lately, had to go to the post office, so I was like, just leave little Forrest in here.
Oh my God, so cute. We were talking about a dog for the audio listeners. So I think, so for me, I think Take-Two would be really interesting. It's just that would eat up all their cash on hand, and then they would still need to raise almost half as much again.
Oh yeah.
But I'll answer the question here as well. These are obvious answers to me, actually, and I'd be interested to know what you guys think of these. For Xbox, it's Embracer. Like, I'll just say it again, like, go buy them and put them out of their fucking misery already. Like, you could go take Embracer, right? Buy Embracer. This is what they want anyway. I mean, Embracer's whole bet, and I read this in the tea leaves, it was so obvious what they were trying to do, but their whole bet was to have constantly generating revenue from A and AAA games, but they realized that it's just so hard to keep these games going, and they are just way over leveraged. The fact that they needed just a couple $2 billion to not cause calamitous cancellations of unannounced games and the closure of studios means that they're really running on a tight budget there. Mm-hmm. I think you just go liberate that. Embracer is perfect for Game Pass. I'm not even trying to be a dickhead. It just is. Like games like Dead Island 2 are like perfect for Game Pass. And
and
I think that you go in there, you save like 10 or 15 of their teams, and you unfortunately, I mean, that's why it would be very difficult to do. It's like you just kind of got to let the rest go. Take the IP, take Gearbox, take all the company, the companies with value, and I think that would be really a great deal for Xbox. I said that earlier. I said it on another show where I'm like, I really feel like that would be a more significant deal for them in some way for Game Pass mid and long term than Call of Duty. Like because it's peppering tons of shit. Like you just get access to tons of games. If it's content at all costs, then Embracer is the company you go after. And then, and I wouldn't give a flying fuck if that happened, by the way.
That would be a managerial nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going
Jesus
through
Christ.
all those teams.
You would have to do it with the intention of cutting it down.
Yeah, which would be like an optics nightmare for them, I think. They'd be like, all right, let's get Embracer Group, and now let's literally execute 50%.
Yeah, it would be bad.
They murder them too. That's the crazy part.
Yeah, they literally blend them up in a Vitamix.
Whoa.
Was it one of you guys or was it Cog who said that Embracer Group is holding like Crystal Dynamics for Xbox? Might have been Cog. We think
I might have been Cog.
Yeah, he had this theory that because Embracer had a Game Pass deal, or I shouldn't say that because it's not 100% sure. It's assumed that they had a Game Pass deal for their whole library fall through, which lost them a lot of money. And it's funny because with Crystal Dynamics being owned by Embracer and now helping make Perfect Dark, I think it was Cog who's under the theory that they're holding some of those Western studios from Square Enix formerly to then be brought back into Xbox at some point. So that would be one way of buying Embracer, if you will, which is letting them just offload some crap. But I think that'd be some of the most lucrative stuff they have when you look at everything else that they own, that half the shit I've never even heard of.
Yeah, I mean, dollars to donuts, like you would just get Saber Interactive and like a bunch of like workhorse teams and just like a ton of IP that you could just stash away and even kill 80% of it if you want. Yeah, it would be optically bad for them, obviously, but that to me, I'm not surprised that Embracer and Xbox would be talking. That seems to be a marriage just on a content level makes perfect sense to me. They would want to hedge their bets as much as they could, I would assume. And
they should.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, they should get more support studios in general, honestly. Like, because Microsoft has a big contractor problem. Like, and that is, and I say that based on people who have like reached out to me who worked in those specific environments where they're like, the turnover there is bad because they rely so heavily on contractors. So like, it would actually behoove them to have studios like Saber Interactive or even just like even some other studios within Embracer's umbrella just to work in some kind of support role. Like if they're working on some IP that no one knows about or really cares about really in any substantial way, like why not have them be in-house people who actually work on the stuff that you don't have to throw over to people who don't care, who just want to get their name in like the credits of something. Like it's I don't know, it's bad.
And then the company, I think for Sony, we've said a bunch already, but this one hasn't come up yet. So I wouldn't be surprised if I woke up one morning and they bought any of the Japanese companies, including Sega. In fact, I wonder if they feel more aggressive about Sega now, knowing that Microsoft was aggressively sniffing around, and that might be the most palatable to the Japanese audience for them to buy anyway. So if you took Sega off the market, you basically isolate the rest of the Japanese market because there's really no other logical place for Microsoft to go from there. So that would be interesting. But I don't think they even have the capital necessarily to want to do that either, because if they made deals like this, it would burn through a lot. Like you don't want to spend all of your cash on hand. That's why this deal for Microsoft was so inconsequential in some way. And CD Projekt is the company that I would bring up for Sony.
Interesting. Yeah. That was a rumor a while ago too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I don't know if there's any, I'm always wary of any rumors of, it's not to say no one could, I guess, know, but it would seem very unlikely that anyone would know that these deals were happening. And when we think about everything that was discovered through discovery, through the FTC case, we realize all these plans, we never got word of any of this shit. So CD Projekt seems to make sense to me because I think there's multiple things. Is that I think Sony has a deficit with what would be considered a Western role-playing game, and they need to fix that. They do RPG mechanics and RPG Lite really well, but they don't really have a game like Fallout or Elder Scrolls or anything. And really their competitor is starting to, I don't want to use the term monopoly because it's not, but they're starting to monopolize the great developers in that space. And especially Obsidian was first, but then getting Bethesda, you basically have 2/3 of, let's say even half of the open world Western style role-playing game scene. And really you're talking about kind of Polish teams like Techland and CD Projekt that will be left over. And I love Techland, and maybe they would be ripe for the picking, but I don't think that's even big enough. I think getting something like the rights to The Witcher, getting Cyberpunk, I think would help them a lot. And
Yeah.
CD Projekt can probably be gotten at a little bit of a budget. They're recovering on the market. Their games are selling a lot better. Cyberpunk, as they said, it's kind of on a rehabilitation tour, and it's doing really well on with the DLC Phantom Liberty coming soon. This just seems to me, again, reassessing the inherent thing that we wouldn't want any of these things to happen, and reassessing the idea that there's almost no logical second party like relationship that Sony can consummate in some way. CD Projekt seems to be an ideal get for them at a price that I think they could easily afford. And
I like that one.
And they could do it hostily, but I think by just going and buying it on the market. But I think they can just go to the board and offer them what they want. And and I think that getting a spot in Poland is good. Poland, I think, is a burgeoning, and we've said this over and over again on the show, it's a burgeoning scene of games developers there. I mean, they have been there for a long time, and just in Eastern Europe, I mean, just having a Sony first party there that can get that talent and gravitate them towards, even if they keep CD Projekt multi-platform, which I think they would if they bought a platform like CD Projekt. And by the way, if they bought Square Enix, I think that they would foreclose on Xbox, but I think they would keep everything on Nintendo. And I think that would be the case going forward. And I think that would be looked at as a tit for tat with Bethesda, and I don't think they'd have any problem doing that to Xbox at all. So CD Projekt, I think, might operate differently because there's such a big audience that loves that kind of stuff on Xbox. Sony lacks that sort of thing. Games are getting overwhelmingly big, in my opinion, and I'm turned off by it. Like, the more I read about Starfield, the more I'm like, I can't even fathom playing this game. It's just too fucking much.
We have got write-ins about that. Like, I'm a parent of two. How am I going to play this game?
Yeah, like, I don't think you are. It's a lifestyle. It's like you're going away to this other star system. And so I like the idea of CD Projekt, but it's a bummer because I wanted to underline this, that no one said this on the show, but I just hate when I see people bandy around the idea that, Sony kind of asked for this situation by buying studios over the years so aggressively in some senses. But I just argue that those deals all made a lot of sense, that no one outside of PlayStation lost anything when those deals happened pre PS5. And that it seems so much different and more punitive today. So when people say, like, well, Sony bought Guerrilla, it's like, well, what did you lose when Sony bought Guerrilla? Because they were already making Killzone. When Sony bought Sucker Punch, they were making Sly Cooper and Infamous already. These are just the
organic
deals. Well, that is literally the definition of organic growth, right? Is like nurturing, funding, then buying. And that was a safe and reliable way for Sony to do business. And they're no longer going to be able to do business that way, which is why I think that, and that's why I said it's a total selfish thing, because that is the nature of the beast. I think Cog is the one who kind of said that. It's just kind of the breaks. But so CD Projekt makes no sense in Sony's culture, but that's not the way they're building anymore. And that's obvious. So the days of Media Molecule being bought, the days of Sucker Punch being bought, even the days of Housemarque and Insomniac joining the team seem quaint compared to what I think things are going to look like in the future. And so, yeah, maybe CD Projekt. That's my idea. And that's what I have to say about that.
I like that.
All right, my friends, we've gone really long. I appreciate your guys' time.
Of course.
Let's go around the horn and say goodbye to everyone. Chris, goodbye to you.
All right, goodbye, man. I don't know, I got nothing else to do today. Today is one of those, I'm just waiting for sponsor stuff or waiting for sponsors to
ain't that the best.
Yeah, it's awful. Dude, it is crazy how often I will race to a deadline, and then they'll ask for like one arbitrary edit, and then they'll be like, and then it's fine that I'm late.
Yeah.
So like, what is this deadline even?
Yeah. That's annoying. I'm sorry to have to do that.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
Maddie, I'm sure you have your hands full. Goodbye to you. Congratulations again. It's so exciting.
Thank you.
I'm still fresh off of moving into my first house, and I know how much that means to a person. So I'm really happy for you.
If I come on Constellation, it'll definitely be something circling around that for my topic, because it's been a lot. It's been really fun. It's also like, it's my first time moving out. It's a little scary. I won't lie. It's definitely been emotional. I've never been away from my family in this distance and time. Time definitely, but like distance wise, not really.
How far away geographically are you from them?
I'm just about like an hour
out. Oh, okay. That's not so bad.
Exactly. Which is what everyone says. Right? Oh, it's not that bad. And it's true. It's a testament to growing as a human. I definitely was very comfortable. I'm very lucky to have had it easy in a lot of ways. And so it's been a good, eye-opening kind of learning experience. And so I'm looking forward to growing through it. But yeah, it's been exciting. Like just kind of having this spot here and it's straight up MySpace, and it's all nerded out in here. I mean, we got to do the walls, repaint them and everything, but I think Dustin, you were in my head as I walked in this place and was walking around, because I remember you saying you'll always find something that you want to change, and you always want to tweak a little something in your house. And I was like, I won't be me. Oh, dude, I'm finding everything I want to customize everything.
Yeah,
so,
I think about it on a constant basis as well. I totally understand. It's fun, and I'm happy for you. It's cool. It's a big deal.
Thank you.
And I think you'll be pleased. I'm interested to see how you adjust to you're going to work from home, right? So,
yep. This has been nice because
it's awesome, dude. I can't believe I just want to really see how it works out for you long term.
I will keep you posted. Right now, I'm really liking the idea of just sliding in here, recording, and I go upstairs, maybe get some food, and that's it. Like it's great. So,
so you're in like a finished basement of some sort?
No, this is like a side room. It's like one of the only rooms in the house with carpet in it. So I was like, well, that's my office. Like I immediately have sound dampening. But it's on like the lower level. Yeah, it's not a basement. We don't really have.
Is it like one of those houses in New York where it's like you walk into the middle of it and then go up or down?
Split level.
Split level.
It is a split level house.
Cool.
Yep.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice.
You said upstairs.
One
day
I can have the whole LSM crew here. I can host stuff now, which is nice.
Yeah, that would be fun.
I don't know what would bring you guys here, but nonetheless, if that ever happens, you're more than welcome.
Well, yeah, I'm super happy for you. Yeah, so congratulations again. We'll figure out a housewarming gift. I'll be in touch about that. And then
I appreciate it.
Dustin, goodbye to you, my friend.
Goodbye. I'm gonna cook some dinner.
Nice.
And I've just been thinking, I'm almost done with my journey in Final Fantasy 16. Sad to say goodbye to who Holly and I have been calling Clive Cliverson. At some point, I think Holly was like, what's his name? I'm like, I don't know, Clive Cliverson or something like that. And then so now every character, I'm like, oh, that's Jill Gillerson.
And then there's you're ruining the whole panache of the game by doing that.
Yeah, nothing wrong. Our friend Clive Cliverson, he's gonna be going away. I don't know what's gonna happen to him. I don't know what's gonna happen to anybody. But
it's a good ending. It's a good ending.
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm at 93%. It says on PSN, but I'm just cleaning up. I'm doing every side quest as they come to them, and then I'm doing all the hunts as they come to them. So I'm just kind of cleaning everything up as I go towards what appears to be the final dungeon, but I don't know.
You'll know.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's a really wonderful game personally. And we're gonna meet. Well, hopefully all of us will be on it, but I think Mike is reaching out to everyone. We're going to try to do the Final Fantasy 16 conversation soon. We had I think we can go hours on the game because there's just so much to say about it. I'm really excited about that. Hopefully we can accommodate everyone. I think Hogue will try to be on that one as well. It'll be good to see him. And then I'm just going to go in the pool. I think it's hot as fuck.
It is
outside,
hot.
And I've been just shooting hoops in the pool, man. I'm telling you, I'm loving this little basketball hoop. You got the little basketballs, just shooting some J's. Maybe I'll drink a little bit of a beer. I don't try to drink at home anymore. It gets a little out of control if I do that sometimes. But maybe I'll crack a beer open. It's just so oppressively hot out that like the pool is just hot.
It's pretty bad universe. Like we're like across the country, we've hit that point now.
Mm-hmm.
Where like yesterday in LA, it was humid, and I was like, "How the fuck is this possible?"
Yeah, that
was jarring. Where it felt like Florida outside. I was like, "Yo, no, this is not what I signed up for at all."
All right, my friends. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for spending some time with me here on Sacred Symbols Plus. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. We'll see you next time for more on all of our respective shows and back here on Sacred Symbols Cross Defining Duke. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Peace out.
Later.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.